Oh man, you guys are an impatient bunch. Goodness gracious. How's everybody doing? What I don't understand is how you guys get in here so early. Like I just got the alert myself that I don't know. Like you guys figured it out in the YouTube world. That's awesome. But thanks for coming. Thanks for jumping in. Um, I see a lot of you have taken a guess at who the special guest is this evening, which I'm impressed because it literally says who the special guest is in the subject line. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce our special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, James Reeves. Just kidding. Sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, Handsome Joe.
I wish I was James Reeves sometimes.
I actually would, just to throw this out there, I did speak with him. Like I shared this on stream last night. I did speak with James Reeves, and he is. Oh, hold on. I hit refresh a lot. What is our thing messed up? I bet it's Handsome Joe. Of course, it says in the. Yeah, no, I did speak with James Reeves, and we are scheduling a time for him to come back. He would love to. He said he had a blast. So. Cool. So tonight, if you see what the title of the video says, we're talking about your Second Amendment. Now, your constitutional rights are what were given to you by being born, by existing, right? Like the bear wasn't given its claws by state ordinance, or the shark wasn't given its teeth by some like merchant on the beach. So we all know we're kind of in the same vein, right? These are God-given rights given to you by your creator, and they are guaranteed by the Constitution. So tonight we're going to discuss the Second Amendment, and with obviously Handsome Joe knows a lot about. He doesn't like that we call him that. Joe knows a lot about that. Obviously, he's a huge advocate, a great friend of the channel, but also has spent a lot of time behind a gun, and a lot of that's going to come out tonight. So basically tonight we're going to talk about the Second Amendment, the origin of the Second Amendment and the militia, the concept of building an armory, which is going to be dope. Selecting and picking out an AR-15, and the historical cost of firearms, which is a super dope topic. I like your curtains, Joe. So with all that I've said, I'm just going to go ahead and give it to Joe to jump in, man. It is all yours, my friend.
Thanks, Dart. Appreciate it, man. So yeah, basically trying to get these all in some kind of a decent order. And I got a lot of thoughts going through my mind all the time about this type of stuff. But since this is primarily addressed to an American audience, we talk a lot about the Second Amendment. So I figured what better place to start than the actual Second Amendment. And we got all the memes, we got all the t-shirts, we got all the flags, we got organizations, legal groups, and all this stuff that are always trotting out the Second Amendment. And a lot of times they just end up trotting out like a small section of it. Shall not be infringed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. RKBA, we like, it gets watered down and it gets shrunk down to like this meme or t-shirt tagline. And so I kind of wanted to do, I wouldn't say like a deep dive, but get a little bit down in the weeds on the Second Amendment itself, and then how that plays into all these other topics that I'd like to hit on tonight with you guys and with Dart. So first things first, I'm going to read the Second Amendment just all the way through, and then kind of highlight a few key words and phrases that are in the Second Amendment. So what tonight's discussion is basically going to be about is a discussion on fighting weapons, specifically AR-15s and rifles, in the United States. Who this is going to apply to is everything that gets listed in the Second Amendment, which is as follows: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So the first kind of like phrase that I want to look at, starting from front to back, is well-regulated. There's like leftist, socialist, communist, anti-gun, anti-freedom groups and individuals that have tried to say that well-regulated means restricted. Like you would have a bunch of regulations or rules or laws governing everything that follows. But in reality, from everything that I've been able to find, the term or the phrase well-regulated is indicative of a well-oiled machine. It's orderly, it is organized, it is structured, it is logical. So a well-regulated militia could also be paraphrased as a well-ran militia, a well-structured militia, a well-equipped militia, a well-outfitted militia. A bunch of other words that you could toss in that could go right along with that word regulated. And of course, with the bastardization of English, we end up 200 something years later where regulated now means like you got to go get your sticker from the EPA, you know, or like got to go get your thing from the ATF to have this thing. You got to follow the regulations. And that's not necessarily exclusively what that word meant back in the 1780s.
I think regulations and restrictions became confused a little bit.
Yes, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So well-regulated what? I can't talk tonight. Well-regulated militia. Okay, so who's the militia?
Your audio cut.
Oh, no.
Oh, you're in now. Sorry.
Test.
Yeah, testes.
Okay.
Are good. Sorry about that. I don't know.
No worries, man. So who's the militia? At the time the Constitution was written and all these different amendments were put in, the militia was every able-bodied male between the ages of 18 and 45. So what we would refer to in modern conversational English as military-age males. So basically everybody, right? Women were exempt from it. There were other people that were exempt from it. But throughout time, more and more people got added to the definition of who was actually in the militia. In the 1860s, 1862, it was extended to all non-white males, whereas previously it had only been white males. There's some discussions back and forth on whether it was from 1862 onwards all non-white males or specifically only black males. I don't know. That's totally different discussion for another time. But either way, from 1780s and before, all the way up through the 1860s, it was every able-bodied military-age white male. And then from the 1860s onwards, it was at least every able-bodied white and black male. And then throughout time, you know, we've had all these other groups that have been added into this. They're trying to push it now to where, you know, women are part of the militia as well. So it's basically the whole people. So right now you'll see people saying things like, well, the militia has been completely replaced with the National Guard or with law enforcement or with federal agencies or the Department of Defense. And that's just not true. That's not what it originally meant. And that's not what it has been modified to mean. And that's not what it currently means. So the militia is basically every single able-bodied male at minimum. And again, between the ages of 17 or 18 up to like 45. If you're some 56-year-old dude and you want to get your gunfight on, like you can be in the militia. I don't care. Like, I don't set the rules. But, you know, military fighting males, dudes that can keep up in a fight, carry their own gear, and know their weapon in and out. So why would we have a well-organized or a well-structured militia? Ooh, scary. Put that away. Do you like my 2D window sticker? It's one of those like textured window stickers.
But now the light has changed, so there's an actual shadow behind it.
Well, yeah, because it's like 2 pane glass, so there's like
That's
a
right.
gap. Yeah,
Right.
I got glass that's like that thick. These are all Humvee windows. Yeah, no, that'd be pretty dope though.
3D printed window.
Yeah. So why would we have a well-regulated militia? Well, the next part of the Second Amendment indicates this. It is necessary. Being necessary. If you do not have a well-regulated militia, you cannot have the next thing. So the being necessary part connects the first part with the next part. Being necessary to what or to who? Necessary to the security. So we talk a lot about safety and security, the Transportation Security Administration, like Department of Homeland Security, all these different agencies and people that would want us all to have more safety and security. And like Ben Franklin said, those that would trade essential liberty for safety deserve neither. So the security of what? The security of a free state. I'm not an English major. I'm not an English teacher or anything like that. I barely speak it. But free state is a very interesting choice of words, because in my mind that could mean a couple of different things. It could mean like the free state of Vermont, or the free state of Virginia, or the free state of Maine. It could also mean the state of freedom, like you, Dark, me, Joe, existing in a state of freedom. In order for us to exist in a state of freedom, there has to be security, and that security is derived by a well-regulated militia. A well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of our state of freedom. I could be completely wrong on that, and that could not be like how it's supposed to be taken or read, but free state is either going to mean a state of freedom or a free independent state, as in like a nation state or a state like Montana, Idaho, Nebraska, what have you.
Right. I think it's used as a term of generality for like the republic as well. Kind of, it could be any governing state. It could be about. I think they use that word on purpose to, not be bound to something specific in the future.
Yep. And yeah. I mean, most importantly, regardless of how you want to look at it, it all comes back to free, right? So kind of hard to have this free state if you don't have security, and then that security is derived through a well-regulated militia. So now we get into what everybody's like favorite part is, the right of the people. Again, who are the people? The people is, again, at minimum, every able-bodied military-age male, 18 to 45. Does that mean that when you turn 46, like this doesn't apply to you? No, obviously not. But looking into the definitions of like what this different stuff all meant originally, and then what it's been twisted or reimagined or reinterpreted to mean, I just want to kind of talk about each section. So the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So there's been a few different writings put in by some of the founding fathers where they ask, who is the militia? And I forget who exactly said this, but one of the guys said, it exists of all of the people. It's every single person in the country, both men and women of all ages. So keep and bear, there's been some stuff going on in like the Ninth Circuit Court with Hawaii where they're saying, well, you have a right to own a gun, aka keep, but you do not have a right to carry a gun, bear. So like their definition of the Second Amendment is basically have the gun in your closet and then unload it and put it in a bag and put it in the trunk of your car and then drive to the range and see you have the right to keep. Like, yeah, exactly. Like you can't carry it on your person, open or concealed. There's people in Hawaii that do that. There is some kind of permit process. I don't think there should be permits, but there are people today, there's entire states that can't figure out what keep and bear means, which is pretty ridiculous. So keep and bear what? Keep and bear spoons, keep and bear bags of money, keep and bear, like, what are we talking about? Arms. So arms
or
specifically.
knives if you're in the UK. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, or butter knives, blunt, dull tipped butter knives if you're in the UK.
Only.
Yeah. So arms specifically means, again, at a minimum, military equipment, not clone correct military equipment, not almost as good as military equipment, not it looks like a military style weapon, like legitimate military equipment, as good or better than military rifles, cannons, pistols, shotguns, firearms, etc. Again, at a minimum. Like there's no way you can scroll your way out of that one. Like that's just straight up what it means. Like how would you have a militia that provides security to free people with, you know, archaic, ancient antiques? Like why would we need security? Well, there's bad people in the world. So arms specifically is describing military weapons, military grade hardware. You know, we don't need these weapons of war in our streets. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So that's kind of the, like, going through the whole thing. Talking specifically about independence, which is something that has been talked about quite a bit on this show in the past, and it's something that's very important. I wanted to read this quote from John Adams in a speech to the U.S. Congress, January 8th, 1790. Quote, "A free people ought not only to be armed, but disciplined, to which end a uniform and well-digested plan is requisite, and their safety and interest require that they should promote such manufactories as tend to render them independent on others for essential, particularly for military supplies." End quote. So in that short couple of sentences, what he's saying is that free people should not just be armed, but they should be disciplined. If you have a bunch of guns and you don't know how to use them, if you have a bunch of guns and you can't be safe with them, like you're a danger to yourself, like you blow your head off handling it, then what good is it? If you have a bunch of guns and a bunch of training, but it's terrible training, like you went to the IDF school of, like, the head bobble weave school of CQB. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you should look up that. It's a pretty funny video on YouTube. Like that's not going to help you out. Disciplined is key in this. Uniform and well digested. Well digested goes along with the idea of well regulated. It's a well thought out plan. Doesn't mean we need to have like 1,000 little rules of like check the box. Like, did you fill out your 4473, sir? Can I see a copy of your state ID? Like all these little things that we have to go through from these bureaucrats. That's not what it's talking about. Too much of that. So a well-digested plan is requisite. That means it's critical, it's important, it's imperative. And your safety and interest require that we, the people, should promote amongst ourselves manufactories that tend to render us independent from others for essentials, particularly military supplies. So right now, this whole like past year plus, we have been dependent on the supply chain for ammunition, primers, brass, barrels, handguards, lower receivers, upper receivers. We're starting to see and have been seeing all these different, industries, if you can call them that, like 3D printing, where we are in a lot of cases independent from the supply chain. Hey man, like, yeah, your 3D printed lower receiver is probably not going to work as well as long as an aluminum receiver. But would I rather have that as a stopgap measure until I can get something better? Absolutely. If I can't source magazines to, do some training or some drills or some practice, I could 3D print some magazines. So like having the ability to acquire the materials that are essential for liberty outside of the normal supply chains is huge. And that's something that we should all promote and that's something that we should all participate in, and that is something that we should all demand. Why does my lead, why does my brass, why does my copper jackets, why does my primer compounds, why does my gunpowder come from like 5 places? There's 50 states. Every state at a minimum should have their own ability to produce enough arms and ammunition to arm all of the citizenry in their state at a minimum.
County.
Down to the county, down to the township, down to the city, down to, like 500 square yards, like whatever. Like everybody should have their ability to go out and get the stuff that they need to keep them independent from having to rely on a national, regional, or global supply chain to acquire this type of stuff. I've talked.
If I could add something in real quick on that,
yeah.
That's something that we've been getting wrong since the beginning. Like if you look at a pencil, just a literal number 2 pencil, the graphite, or lead, graphite, whatever, the wood, the aluminum, the eraser, everything is sourced from different places, sometimes different countries. So that's a perfect example. It's crazy. So yeah, we've been getting that wrong from the beginning.
So like, I have friends that surprise, I have friends that reload, and when the whole ammunition thing started kicking off, they were like, reloader go ka-chunk, like, because they had a stockpile of brass and a stockpile of projectiles and gunpowder and primers and whatever else. But like, wait another year, wait another 2 years, and see how many times your reloader go ka-chunk, right? Like, when you start realizing where all of these components originate from and how difficult it is to actually acquire those at a local source. So if you can't get online and click a button, if you can't go into a big box store or a small box store, a mom and pop shop, if you can't go in there and pay, barter, or trade for those essentials to reload a single round, then are you truly doing a whole lot better than the guy that relies normally on the ability to walk into a Bass Pro or a farm and ranch store or a gun shop to buy his box of ammunition? If anything, you're as dependent as that guy is. You just have extra steps. Like, you still have to go and pay for these individual SKUs to then bring it all into your garage or your basement or your shop and reload or go ka-chunk. If a part breaks on your reloader, you got to go through the reloader manufacturer, who probably isn't like, their factory isn't down the street from you for most people. So like, we have everything just spread out and centralized to where when they want to put the squeeze on something, they can very easily do so. That doesn't mean I'm like against reloading or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, if you go back to the time that this was originally penned, they had shot towers in like every county. So they would have a tower where they were manufacturing and forming lead shot, projectiles, balls, buckshot, slugs. Like, the amount of effort and energy that it required to import that stuff across the ocean, or import it across state lines, or import it from one county to the next, made it not feasible, because you're pulling everything in on flat bottom barge or boat or oxen or horseback or on some dude's back, like miles and miles and miles through the mountains to get the ammunition to where it needs to go. So they would make the gunpowder on site in most locations, in most situations. They would make the shot in a very, very close location to where people needed it. And you had blacksmiths and gunsmiths in every town, in every village.
Yeah.
Now we're getting back to some of that stuff with 3D printing and with, a gun shop on every corner, and the proliferation of people that have access to the technical data package for the AR-15 and being able to like have a simple machine shop and make their own aluminum lower and upper receivers. There's thousands of companies making complete ARs, just uppers, just lowers, 80% stuff, like all over the country. So that's awesome.
Well, that's why we're so big on what Matt does, and all the people like Matt.
Yep.
Like they literally can build tools to make shit, and you know what I mean. Like they can bang out knives, they can bang out axes and swords, and they can bang out tools to make those things. And if there was a way to like cast aluminum receivers in a I'm drawing a blank on in like um, oh my god,
like forge.
Yeah, a forge. Thank you.
Yeah.
A forge like that. We're still dependent on the supply chain to some degree, because we're not going to be carving our own bolt carrier groups out of wood or like whittling them away.
I've seen somebody almost do that.
Really?
There was
I am set on doing a Glock lower out of wood, but
yeah.
I digress. Sorry.
Let me know how that works out. Yeah. So here's the thing, and we're gonna kind of swing away from this here in a little bit, but we need to be as independent as we possibly can. In an ideal world, if you wanted an AR-15, you would make your own AR-15, like down to like the pins and the springs and the barrel. Having a little bit of a community where like, okay, maybe I don't have the setup or the time or the effort or the energy to make my own AR-15 barrels, but like getting towards that is better than being further away from that. So however small it is, getting more towards that. But I'm specifically talking right now about ammunition and how centralized and how tightly controlled ammunition is in this country. And it doesn't need to be that way. It's gotten to that point, and it needs to start swinging the other direction. And there are people actively working on that, both individuals and companies, to try and make that happen. But I really like that quote from John Adams where he's talking about all that stuff. Be independent from others for essentials, particularly military supplies. So arms, ammunition, backpacks, belts, clothing, bandages, medical equipment, field rations, all that stuff. You should have a way to make that yourself or source that yourself without relying on some big box chain store to get it to you. And so we all need to find ways to reach that goal.
One other thing to add on that, if you read through all the quotes, during the inception of the Constitution, they constantly reference honorable, disciplined, virtuous people. And what traits do you see fleeing the people in the United States like literally as we speak?
It's been pushed so far away from like the everyday person that it's easy to go after all this stuff. There's a reason that we are now seeing for the last almost 100 years, since 1934, all this ever increasing movement at the federal and state level to restrict and restrict and restrict and infringe and infringe and infringe, because we're not primarily dealing with a moral and righteous people. And so that's first and foremost what we do need to get back to at an individual and at a family level is, returning to God and being kind to your neighbor and putting other people first and being humble and not seeking just for you. It's about the next generation and their generations and so forth and so on. Planting trees and thinking long term and not just being selfish.
It's almost like if there was a YouTube channel where someone were to focus people to live a life of compassion and care and contribution to others and compassion. Oh, okay, sorry. No, another
little self-promotion there.
Yeah, I know, right?
I said humble, Dark. I said humble.
I know. I'm being funny. But it was interesting because when we had Johnny B on here, he's a teacher full time. Like that's his full time thing.
And can you imagine him as your teacher?
Oh man, that'd
That'd be
be.
fun.
He was like, I spend a lot of time pissed off because this new generation of kids that are like, I don't want to like throw out like the age group that he teaches, but these kids that are double digits younger than us. Every single problem he threw at them, every challenge, every solution that they came back with was something for the government to do, something for the government to throw money at, something for the state to do, the feds to do. It was not like personal responsibility is gone.
Yep.
Discipline, virtuous people, honorable people. I want to say it's gone. The biggest opportunity we have is, like you said, is to live by those morals and teach others to live by those morals and to showcase them to others. Teach your kids, like,
Yep. Absolutely, man.
I'll get off my soapbox.
No, that was a good soapbox. You should carry that around with you and jump on it all the time.
I do.
Yeah. So going from here, talking about Second Amendment and talking about who it applies to and what it means, let's talk a little bit about the history of the militia, just very briefly. So the Militia Acts of 1792, 1795, 1808, 1862, and 1903. There may be other ones that are between these, before these, or after these that I haven't covered and won't cover. But just very briefly, the original Militia Act of 1792 and 1795, between those two, they called for every single able-bodied man to arm and equip himself. So you were not relying on the government to give you a gun and ammunition and a backpack and a sword or a tomahawk or a bayonet or a sidearm or clothing or rations. You brought that yourself. That was the entire concept of like citizen soldier, not like the Switzerland program where you go down and you get military training and then they hand you a rifle and you take it home, right? Like you brought your own gun. And then they modified this slightly because they recognized that like the militia from this county and the militia from this county were all showing up to the party, to the shindig, with different calibers. So like when the British starts coming in and messing with the United States after the formation of the United States, after the signing of the Constitution, around the War of 1812 period, they were like running into all these situations where all these different militias from the same states, sometimes in the same unit, were showing up to fighting and whatnot with completely different calibers. Now, back then, it would be a little easier to work with because at least you'd be using the same powder and the same kind of patch material and all this other stuff that you'd be running with a flintlock and then eventually, percussion cap muzzleloader. So if you were in a situation where like you had a 62 caliber musket or rifle and the only thing you could find was 60 caliber projectiles, you could make that work with different size patching. But what this speaks to for modern times is you don't see quite as much of this anymore, but you used to see quite a bit of it. And that was people on the internet, people on gun forums, people at gun clubs that were like almost borderline like bragging on the fact that they didn't own an AR-15 that takes AR-15 mags and chambered in 5.56. Like, I own a Mini 30, or I have a Tavor, or I have an AUG, or whatever kind of weird gun. And to a certain extent, like as long as it runs an AR-15 magazine, an M4 magazine, chambered in 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO, then at least if there's something going down, you'd be able to scrounge mags and ammunition and run them across different platforms. But when you start talking about like long drawn out stuff, if you're the guy that is showing up to the party with some just weird esoteric nonsense meme gun because you want to be different. Well, there's like downsides to being different in that context. It's America, do what you want, but we're talking about uniform, well-digested plan that's requisite and well-regulated, like a well laid out plan. Buy as many guns as you want, own whatever you want. Like that's on you. But if you don't have at least one fighting rifle or AR-15, regardless of whether it's a rifle or a pistol or whatever, if you don't have at least one AR-15 chambered in 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO that takes standard magazines, you're doing yourself a severe disservice. In a gunfight, the equivalent of you having some weird oddball gun chambered in some weird oddball caliber is going to be like trying to find fuel for a vehicle that runs on some kind of boutique fuel. It's like having peanut allergies with nothing but peanuts to eat. Like, you don't want to be that guy. So talking about having a well-regulated or well-ran machine, if back in the 1790s they recognized the need for dudes to be able to show up with their long gun, their rifle or their musket, and it have the same caliber as everybody else, we might do well to learn from that. It's almost like maybe some people paid for that lesson in blood over the years, and maybe continue to pay that lesson in blood. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and have a fighting weapon in the United States in 2021 that is not an AR-15 and is not chambered in 5.56. I'm not saying don't have other guns and other calibers, but I'm saying at a minimum have that and then branch out from there. If your priorities are, I got to have this like, meme flashy gun chambered in 6.5 Grendel or 5.45 Russian or something like that, know that you are severely limiting yourself if you should be called upon to protect yourself or your community or your nation, your state in that capacity. So talking about, basically we're talking about dark, is how to go about picking an AR-15 and kind of like why the AR-15. Like it's been mentioned on here before, AKs were cool back when they were 200, 300, 400 bucks, and I'm not.
You're going to get some, sorry, just throwing this out there. Oh, what's up, Bacon? Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Here's something for Dark's melatonin fund. Wow. Thank you, brother. 223. See, even his super chats are 223, right?
Yeah.
No, I did overhear the conversation. I know you'll likely get some hate on, the 5.56 PMAG, AR-15 thing, but I think a lot of people are kind of coming in that direction because they understand that is the most plentiful, like that's what's going to be on the ground in cars and homes on the, if, we are in a WROL situation. It's
called America's Rifle for a reason.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
America's I thought my stamped receiver over. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So like Eugene Stoner was a Marine. Actually met his great grandnephew, who was also a Marine. Me and him were in the same platoon. So this dude shows up to my platoon named Stoner. And I'm like, hey, Stoner, do you smoke a lot of weed, or are you related to the guy that invented the M16? And he's like, I'm related to the guy that invented the M16. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, Eugene, that's my great uncle. I'm like, get out of here, dude. He's like, yeah. He's like, tradition of being in the Marine Corps in my family.
Damn.
And he was a pretty cool dude. He'd met Eugene a few times before he passed, and knew all about his story and everything. But something that's interesting about Eugene Stoner and the AR-15 is, being a Marine, he would have known about some of the issues that the Marine Corps ran into in the Pacific, where you're dealing with very limited sometimes supply chains, like what happened in Guadalcanal, where like the Marines get dropped off on the island and then the Navy's like, bye, and then just sail away, right? So like the only supplies that they had was what they landed with and what had gotten delivered over the last few days. And they had to wait for, a runway to get built and modified and all this other stuff to be able to get new parts and ammunition in.
Yeah.
And a lot of I wouldn't say a lot, but several of the types of firearms that the Marines were using at that time did not have interchangeable parts. And it was standard practice to do cleaning pits. So you get like a school circle of dudes sitting around a mortar crater or something, and everybody would like throw all the bolts into a pile, throw all the charging handles into a pile, throw all this into a pile, and everybody would just like, okay, you guys are going to clean the bolts, you guys are going to clean this. And they would just take everything apart and group them by parts and assemblies while a couple of guys stayed, fully ready to go and armed up. And then you just scrub and clean and then put them all back into each other's guns. And on things like M1 Garands, M1 carbines, and some of the other firearms, that worked well. But they were also working with some guns that did not do that. They were like hand fit, like this part goes with this gun. You can't put that in this gun. Having the ability to, if you needed to, I'm not saying it would be a great idea to like get with your buddies at the range and all swap bolt carrier groups, but if you needed to, knowing that you could do that might actually be important, might actually be of value. Being able to scrounge for parts, being able to cannibalize two guns to make one gun work, type of thing. So Eugene Stoner knew all that and had all that information going into the design of the AR-15, which is why it's kind of important that with an AR-15 you have some level of standardization. Now, what's cool about the AR-15 is it's highly modular and it's highly adaptable, and you can customize it to the nth degree and make it super special and one of one and all that type of stuff, or one in a million. But for the American citizen, for a free person living in 2021, you should have at a minimum at least one rifle, AR-15, pistol, what have you, that is going to be as compatible with as many other types of rifles that you could run into. So if you don't have that, right now is a really good time to be trying to sell a gun. If you didn't know, there's a lot of people trying to buy guns right now, and ammunition and magazines and all that other stuff. So if you got a gun collection instead of an armory where you've got, a room or a box or a safe with 10, 15 guns in it, and you only have one or two rifles that look the same and are somewhat standard with what you might need to have it standard with, then you might want to prioritize that. It's not going to do you a whole lot of good having this like traveling circus of guns and none of the parts interchange and none of the stuff can switch around and you can't cannibalize parts to make another thing work. So that's kind of like the downside of going down the whole FN SCAR, Steyr, AUG, Galil, Valmet, AK, all this other stuff. They're all cool rifles and I like them. They're fun. They're interesting, but not for this subject. Having at least one. If you went to a police armory or a military armory and you were issued a gun from that armory, here you go, Joe, here's your whatever rifle, and you grabbed it and you function checked it and you're like, hey Sarge, firing pin's gone, right? They could be like, just reach in and grab another firing pin and hand it to you. But if you're in some type of situation where you are independent from all the supply chains and you have to source components, like that's not going to be a fun experience when you're like trying to find your esoteric meme gun's firing pin, or upper receiver or lower receiver parts,
or shaving out of a paper clip or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to rig it up. So I told you that I had somebody that kind of had done that with like making a wood gun. I was in a school in the Marine Corps, and there was a dude in my unit that lost his firing pin retaining pin, the little cotter pin that keeps the firing pin in the bolt carrier group. And instead of being like, I'm an idiot, I lost my firing pin retaining pin, like the smallest part of the rifle that like we take apart regularly and clean, he just took a stick and whittled it down with his knife and shoved it in that hole. And then we shot like 1,000 something rounds with he had a little twig stuck in his bolt carrier group, and it worked fine. Ran fine.
Wow.
I'm not suggesting that y'all go out and do that, but like,
I'm blown away because that's still
yeah.
a good amount of pressure. It must have been jammed in there pretty tightly.
He had like packed this thing in. So we would do these things after and before range where they would have you you'd pull the rear pin, call it break it down shotgun style. You pull the rear pin on the AR-15, or in this case M16 or M4, and lay it on your shoulder so the muzzle's facing that away. And then somebody would walk by and look down your barrel to make sure there was no bore obstructions, you didn't have anything weird going on with your rifle. And then they would check your bolt carrier group, and they would check to make sure that the gas rings were still good and that everything was there. And so one of the instructors walks by and grabs his bolt carrier group and goes chunk and pulls the bolt out, and he's like, "Where's your firing pin retaining pin?" He's like, "I don't know." And we had to like low crawl across the range, hands across America, trying to find this guy's firing pin retaining pin. But the point is, if you're in a situation where you need a firing pin retaining pin and there's no sticks around, but there's a bunch of other people with rifles, like having the same kind of rifle as everybody else makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, especially like if you think of like a family as a unit, right? Like a unit in the military of some sort, having at least mostly the same setup, right? A lot of people have been referencing like who do in a WROL or SHTF situation, who do you pass out firearms to? And I like, we don't necessarily need to touch on that. That's a touchy subject in itself. But the people that you do choose to, if you choose to, having compatibility between parts, having reserve parts, having like that is so important.
Yep.
So I totally agree with what you're saying. Vash does too. He's making a great point. As a militia, having parts we can trade to keep each other armed is a great idea. And backup parts and springs and pins.
Yep.
And
so the argument against that right now is, well, I can't find anything. It's out there. It's harder to get by, come by some of that stuff. You're going to be facing a lot more competition for parts, but it's out there. Check some of the online retailers and your local shops. People have it. Source it yourself, make it yourself, whatever you got to do. But there's still a market somehow for like weird esoteric meme guns, like Galils and FN Scars and AUGs and all that stuff,
which are still awesome.
They're cool guns, and there's still a market for them. And so if you can flip some meme rifle because you don't have a good baseline setup for an armory concept, then do that. And then if things eventually calm down and we get back to a state of normalcy, then go get all the meme guns your heart desires. If you got all your ducks in a row and you've got like, no, dude, like I've got my 4 rifles all identically set up with the same white light, same optic, same sling. Each rifle has 20 loaded mags, so forth and so on. Like, dude, you're good to go. Like, get whatever you want. You want to have like I have every M1 Garand ever made. Like, okay, cool, man. Like that's awesome. But prioritize, right? It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if you were prioritizing food and water to only have one kind of food. Like, what's your plan? Oh, I just grow apples. Just have apple trees. Like, you have no way to like dry or cool meat. Nope. Just eating apples. That's it. Like, so don't necessarily have all your eggs in one basket, because like right now it's hard to get ammunition. It's hard to get calibers. Having a couple extra guns in an oddball caliber or something that fits a very niche purpose or is a utilitarian purpose, like, hey, this is 22 rifle is my squirrel gun, or this 308 bolt gun is my deer rifle, or whatever. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you got a gun collection that's like, I just have these guns just to have these guns, and you haven't thought about having tools for very specific purposes, like a squirrel rifle or a deer rifle or 3 AR-15s all tricked out and set up exactly the same. When you ask, like, who are you trying to arm, it's going to be different for each person. But for me, it's like me, my kids, and my wife. Like, I'm not handing a rifle to some Bubba stranger that I don't know. And I tend to associate with people that already are thinking like this, and they've already armed themselves and the ones that they care about. If somebody's coming up to you and they like didn't plan this out in advance, unless you've known them like your entire life and trust them implicitly, don't be having like a box full of guns to give out to the Executive Outcomes YouTube channel calls the Mosin farmers. You know, like, oh, I have crates of Mosins to hand out to people I wouldn't trust with an AR-15. Like, dude, if you wouldn't trust them with an AR-15, you shouldn't trust them with any gun.
Yeah,
Don't be handing out guns to random strangers.
If they don't have a firearm, then it's highly likely that they don't have food and water. And even if you did know them your entire life, if it's the same thing, like, well, that's going to take the conversation to the left. If
that's fine, man.
If you believe that this individual will still be on your side when they are starving to death or they are dying of thirst, then feel free to arm them. But that person that lived in Bosnia under complete, without rule of law, like, shit at the fan scenario, in the interview, he said every single person, like, the only people you could trust was family. Anyone else, like, they were, literally killing people for the last piece of bread, because guys take in families, and if it's their kids or your kids, I mean, it's literally a fight for survival. It's the same thing as the PWEDC. It's the same thing as those, hood rats, like people on the street that are like, man, I would never snitch on anyone. I would never snitch on anyone. And then until they're handcuffed to a table for 24 hours, 48 hours, right? Like, until shit gets really serious, you see people's true colors really quickly.
And where we're likely headed, we're not going to be talking about people just handcuffed.
Exactly. That's a very light scenario.
Yeah. So, like, I've said this before with you guys, if you want to know, like, what's coming, go look up the Cheka and see what they did to the Russian citizenry in turning the Russian citizenry against themselves. Like, you want to see an entire city be like, those people all have guns and they live there. You would do what the Cheka did, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out that type of stuff.
I'm actually going to do a live stream just based on what you just shared in this conversation. I'm going to do a live stream literally reviewing the word for word interview with that dude that lived in Bosnia during the collapse. I think that will be insanely valuable to everyone.
Yep.
All right, soapbox disengaged.
So, getting kind of back on track, we've talked about like 3D printing and 80% and like whittling your own firing pin, retaining pin. Those things are important. But right now, it is still very difficult for the average end user to have a setup in their garage or in their shop or in their shed or in their basement to where they could literally sit down and machine out and produce for themselves something that is completely on par with a Colt M4A1 or an FN M4A1. So while I'm totally like a fan of 3D printing and 80% and all that stuff, you have to recognize that it is not the same. An AR-15 is not an AR-15 is not an AR-15. So in a serious use situation for long time usage, like this thing right here needs to last my lifetime, my children's lifetime, and their children's lifetime at a minimum. you're looking at a little bit higher quality part. And most of us don't have a machine shop in the garage where we can literally make our own lower receiver out of a blank of aluminum and then know exactly how to do it and pick the right material and anodize it correctly and make sure the pins are all located in correct alignment with all the other pins. I've had 80% lowers where had an armor look at it after the fact, and he's like, the machine job here that the tool path did was actually good. The problem was the 80% blank that you bought, the 80% of the milling that was already done was whacked from the get-go. Like they didn't cut the slot for the magazine well correctly. They didn't cut the location for the bolt catch correctly. They didn't cut the pinhole like in line with the other, like all these different things. So no matter what parts kit that I put into it, no matter how much like fiddling I did with it, it just wasn't going to work correctly. And that's the danger, if you will. I want to say danger, but that's like the downside of going with a homemade gun. We should get closer to the ability to, like, in your own garage, turn out something that's the equivalent of an M4A1, both from a performance and a quality perspective. But we're not there yet. So I don't want to like say, oh, let's all jump off the 3D print bandwagon or let's all jump off the 80% bandwagon. No, like we need to get that going. But for right now, if you don't have a good setup that you could like trust your life, your family's life to as a fighting tool, you need to start looking at getting a bit better quality gun. And then let's continue to like push the envelope and see what we can do with 3D printing and 80% lower receivers and all that type of thing.
I think we are, just a quick note. Matt's in here speaking the truth. Thank you, brother. I know I mentioned this before, but the 3D printing thing is the beginning, right? Like there are machines out there right now, mainly used by very large companies that are doing compound printing for suppressors and machine gun parts and things like that, like SIG, and they're doing it with steel and Inconel. And what I have been able to track down is the absolute smallest, most inexpensive machine that can print with steel and Inconel is $5,000, and it likely won't last long because, well, the parts won't last long. They need to be, so we're closer to being able to have things like that, in our homes, and we're also closer to more regulations, restrictions, and legislations that'll keep us from having things like that. So we're at an interesting crossroads.
Yeah, so I want to make sure this isn't going to turn into like the poors versus the affluent, rich people with nice guns. Like that's not what this is about. Yeah. Every able-bodied, military-aged male or person that wants to be equipped with a military arm should be able to do that. And if you're setting your hope up on something that you made in your garage, there's a fair chance that it's not going to be at the same functional level as something that came from a factory. And it's hard for me to say that because I don't want that to be the case, but it is the case. It's the reality that we deal with right now. You're not going to make an 80% lower last as long as a lower receiver that came from a factory.
Yeah.
Talking about factory lowers, not all factory lowers are the same. Not all factory uppers are the same. They may all start from the same forge. They all may start from the same pool of raw material, but the finishing, machining, and the cuts and everything that is done. I'm not talking about aesthetic stuff like engraving and like sculpting this and beveling that. I'm talking about like, do all of the pins line up in correlation to the other pins so that when you pull the trigger, the hammer goes forward just far enough to hit the firing pin, so forth and so on. Like it all has to work correctly. It's a system. And when we start doing it ourselves right now with the technology that's available, there are some important steps that often get overlooked. So I know a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy that's a machinist that makes his own AR-15s. It's totally legal to do this in 2021. So when I'm up before the tribunal in 2024 talking about this, and they pull this recording up or whatever, this was legal today to do this.
I would be suicided by that point.
Yeah, right. But he can't do anodizing. He's looked into it, and it's extremely cost prohibitive. And this is a dude that has like the setup to do machining. Like he can make whole guns if he wants to. He can make muzzle devices. He can make handguards. He can make whatever you want. But the dude doesn't have the setup to do anodizing. He knows people that do anodizing, that like anodize like screwdrivers and stuff, but they won't touch a gun part with a 10-foot stick. One of the critical elements of an AR-15 is the anodizing. It provides a surface hardening finish so that your steel trigger and hammer pins do not wallow out the softer aluminum of the frame of the receiver. So unless you, after you cut into the 80% lower, unless you re-anodize it, and you re-anodize it with the type of anodization called for in the technical data package, you're never going to have something that's at the same level as a factory correctly built part. So if you know how to anodize, if you can figure out how to anodize in your garage, in your basement, and do it the same quality as what's done at Colt, FN, Aero Precision, BCM, Centurion Arms, Sons of Liberty Gunworks, Triarch, all these different shops. If you can figure out how to do that, like, I'm all ears. I've looked into it, and there's some ways to kind of do it, but there's like a recipe to it. And the people that understand how to do it aren't necessarily like sharing that with the rest of the internet. But being able to anodize aluminum is important for making AR-15s. Spray paint is going to like protect the aluminum, but it's not going to prevent a steel trigger or hammer pin from wallowing out the aluminum on an 80% lower.
Yeah. One thing that could be helpful is you could cold blue. You could polish in cold blue just to keep it like from the elements affecting it.
I don't think you can cold blue aluminum.
You can. It's just not going to be blue. It's not going to be. So you can use the like Alumahide cold blue, but it's just going to look crazy. It'll look like almost color case hardened. It would just basically be like a quick way of protecting it from the elements. The best thing to do, because even that would be cost prohibitive, because the small cold blue things are like $15 or maybe more, and it would take several of those probably. But anyway, the other thing that I found to be a very effective coat, which you could do on the interior and exterior, is the Brownell's Alumahide spray coating, which is inexpensive. It's a spray coat that you can cook on, and it barely adds like you would need a micrometer to look at like the amount of buildup, but it's a great coating. It's weather resistant, and I used it on a bunch of different stuff, so that's an option too.
So what I think we're talking past each other, because what I'm specifically talking about is if you take an AR-15 low receiver and you take out the hammer and the trigger pins, and you got the hole that goes through one side of the receiver, and then you got the hole on the other side, and the pin has to go through that hole and through the trigger and then through the other side. That hole, if that inside of that hole is not anodized, you can spray paint it, you can Alumablack, Alumahide, you can do whatever you want to it. It's never going to have the same surface hardness as an anodized part.
Yeah, I apologize. I was responding to people in the.
I got you.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, you're good, man.
I know.
I just wanted to make sure we were on. Like, I'm saying the same thing and everything.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're right.
So here's the thing: the argument will get thrown up of like, well, yeah, but it's still going to work. Maybe. Again, if the 80% that you're starting with is already screwed up, like there might be a reason that they're selling it to you as an 80% lower. Maybe no one else would buy it to then like finish out all the other machining processes. Maybe the reason that you were able to get 3 of them for $45 is because something isn't right. The threads are not cut concentric, the holes are not drilled straight and in line with all of the other holes and cuts. So like, assuming you had a perfectly set up 80% lower, and then you did your machining correctly, the last 20% all perfectly and correctly, the anodization is like that one step that most often gets overlooked because it's very difficult to anodize on your own and anodize correctly.
Yeah.
So it will work, but how long? And that's just like this big question. Again, I'm not saying don't buy 80%, don't do 80%, don't do 3D printing. I'm saying if we're talking about a serious use fighting gun that you're going to stake your life or the lives of your family on, and it working, maybe we don't put all of our eggs in the basket of a plastic 3D printed lower or something that you did in your garage with an 80% lower. That's just me. Like,
Yeah.
Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but think about like, you know, being in 1803 or something and getting called up to like show up with all the guys at the local militia because we're going to like keep the British from coming across the border or something. And like you showed up with like the gun that most of the time works or like the gun that's like in the weird caliber. And like, everyone's just like, oh, Joe, why? Like, everybody here is running a 68 caliber gun. You're the only idiot that keeps showing up here with an 80 caliber. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, dude, why do you insist on making your own triggers? They never work. You know, like it's a liability when we go out here, we start fighting. Your stuff never fires. You don't keep your powder dry. Like your flints aren't napped correctly. Like your sights are all cattywampus off to the left. You can't hit the broadside of one, etc. Like if we all were doing this for real, the stuff that works will quickly, it'll be very easy to tell what works and what doesn't work. But right now, most of the time we don't have a good way of seeing whether our stuff works or doesn't work in a bad situation because most of us aren't in bad situations all the time. So how can we determine what is a good AR-15? And so I've got kind of a laundry list of stuff to like look towards, and then also some stuff to like red flags avoid. So the first thing is the thing has to work. It has to be reliable. So how could you determine whether an AR-15 is reliable or not? How could you determine if your 80% lower receiver is going to make the gun work correctly? How could you tell if a gun that you already have as a window decal or like sitting in your safe functions? In an ideal world where ammunition is readily available, you'd be able to take a basic loadout and fire that entire basic loadout as fast as you possibly can and not have a single malfunction. Basic loadout for an infantryman is 7 full mags. That's 210 rounds. Dude, I don't have 210 rounds that I'm willing to like just go and bang away into the dirt to test a gun right now. Those days are long gone. So I'm going to be doing a video. I've already talked to you about this dart. I'm going to be doing a video that's going to have like a very simple test that you can test your gun in your house and at the range to determine if the thing is going to work when the chips are down. That isn't going to cost you a whole lot of time and isn't going to cost you a whole bunch of ammunition. I think at most it's like 2 boxes of ammunition, 40 rounds, but closer to like the one, 20 round box of 5.56. So it needs to be reliable. Whatever your standard of reliability is, it should be as close to or higher than what the Department of Defense is using for their standard of reliability. That's just me. Like, if you can't leave the wire as a National Guard cook without having a reliable M4 that will do X, Y, or Z, then why should you or I or anybody listening or watching want to have a gun that's less reliable than that? So it should be like at least that reliable or more reliable. So I'm using the Department of Defense stuff as kind of a reference, knowing that most people are not going to be able to spend the time and effort and energy to test their equipment to the level that the Department of Defense tests. And so trying to meet in the middle between, it's probably fine, and actual Department of Defense testing standards, which take a lot of time, effort, energy, and ammunition, most importantly. So the next bullet point is accurate. Everyone's going to have a different definition of accurate. My favorite joke here is like, you should see the size of my one-shot groups at 100 yards, right? Like 5.56 millimeter group. It's freaking awesome. But like, it should be able to hold a group of 4 MOA or better. A minute of angle is 1.047 inches at 100 yards. Why 4 minutes? 4 minutes has always been kind of like the metric by which the U.S. military has judged whether a rifle was suitable for service or not suitable for service. They may have bumped it up to 6 or 8 or dropped it down to 2, but like 4 is kind of what they've always gone for. Is this carbine or is this rifle adequately accurate for general purpose issue as a fighting rifle, as a fighting long gun? So think of like, can you put all of the bullets from a 5-shot group into the back of your palm at 100 yards? Basically, can your cupped hand cover all those bullets? That's actually a fairly generous standard. Now, you may not be able to, or I may not be able to shoot the gun at 4 minutes or better, right? So like the gun may be capable, the rifle, the pistol, whatever, may be capable of 2 minutes of accuracy. The ammunition may then only be capable of 3 minutes of accuracy. And then we are only capable of 6 minutes of accuracy. So there's like all these compounding things that make it kind of hard to assess how accurate is a given gun. And again, this video that I'm going to do here in the near future is going to result in you zeroing your rifle and testing the rifle for reliability and proper function. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in that video. I don't want to spend too much time delving into all this, but 4 minutes or better. And then the next is modular or interchangeable. So like the main assemblies of the AR-15, the receivers, the barrels, the bolt carrier group, the firing pin, all of those things need to be interchangeable. It doesn't necessarily mean they need to be the same. So like Dark may like just mil-spec BCM triggers, right? And I may like a Geisley trigger, right? But me and him could absolutely swap triggers and they would work in each other's guns, right? So I don't want to be running some kind of weird trigger or some kind of weird firing pin or some kind of weird bolt carrier group that is not directly interchangeable with the other dude's gun, the other dude's rifle. I don't want to have some funky lower receiver that the only upper receiver that fits this lower receiver is this upper receiver. Like I want to be able to go like pull 2 pins, grab somebody else's upper, slap it and go, and it work. Ideally, at least fitment wise. I'm not talking about like gas systems and all that, because there's going to be a little bit of variability there. The next thing is going to be caliber and chamber, 5.56 by 45 millimeter NATO. If your barrel's marked 223, it may or may not be 5.56 NATO. If your barrel's marked 5.56 NATO, it may not be 5.56 NATO. I've literally watched gunsmiths take a chamber reamer and put it into a brand new barrel from FN that's marked 5.56 millimeter NATO and go tink, 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 and like shake metal flakes out of the chamber because the chamber was literally cut too tight from an FN barrel, not a Palmetto State Armory barrel that is supposedly from FN, like a barrel from FN. I've seen this with multiple manufacturers of what most people would consider like really good quality barrels. So if you're buying barrels, if you're buying guns, make sure they're chambered in 5.56 NATO, because then they'll run anything, as long as it's not some crazy hot loaded, homemade ammo that you brewed in your basement that's loaded to who knows spec. But it'll shoot 223 Remington and it'll shoot 5.56. If you're starting to go down the 223 Wild and 223 Remington, you're going to have some issues. Armitage, if you show up, like we're just going to have you be the squad leader for all the oddball caliber guys. So then you get to deal with the same issue that I'm talking about. So the next guy that shows up with an 8mm Mauser, he's on your team. And then the next dude that shows up with 7.5 French, he's on your team. And then the next dude that shows up with a 410 Judge, he's on your team. And then you guys can have fun trying to figure out the ammunition cluster screw that will be when you guys all one by one start running out of ammunition and look over and go, throw me a mag. And they throw you a mag and you're like, this isn't going to work. And then like, that's the end of you.
Somebody throws me like
kind of
joking FPC magazine or something like that.
300 blackout in your 5.56.
Oh,
see how that works. So yeah, like dude, I'm totally down with all these weird and not weird calibers. Like they're cool, but for the gun that you would show up to the thing with, like it shouldn't be some weird funky gun and some weird funky caliber.
Well, and someone mentioned something that I think should be addressed. Bacon actually mentioned it about the whole my AR guys, that other firearms aren't needed. So that it's important. It's not what he's saying. He's just saying that the AR or the ARs, like, if you're looking at a family unit and there's an armory, right? We're not saying that like a 308 bolt gun for long distance isn't also an important tool to have as well. But the armory concept is most effective. Now, if you take it to another level, like you have in the military, a bunch of guys with a bunch of 240s. Well, guess what? All the 240s can swap parts, can swap barrels, can swap, right? All the, what are they in the military? The M21, the Remington 700 and 308.
They've kind of ditched those now, but like, yeah, like,
but same
in the Marine Corps, it'd be an M40A7. Okay. I don't know what the Army's all ditched their bolt guns, so they're running M110s and M110A1s.
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
the same kind of concept, right? Like they can all still, it's just the armory concept. Not saying that one AR is like you're safe after that, or I just wanted to throw that out there because other firearms still serve a purpose.
Think about like, this is going to be kind of a weird analogy, but think about like your silverware drawer, right? Like all the forks that are roughly the same size and for the same purpose go in this slot, and all the knives that are kind of for this purpose and this rough size go in this slot, right? Then you start worrying about like having the oddball utensils for like that very niche, like, oh, here's my pizza cutter. You're not going to eat your cereal with a pizza cutter, dude. Like, you're not going to cut your pizza with a spoon. I mean, maybe you are, and you're some weird freak, but like having a stash of the appropriate tool to do this type of work and then worrying about the other stuff. No one's saying don't have 357 SIG or 7.62 by 39 or 6.5 Grendel. I'm saying like get your ducks in a row, get the armory thing going, and when you have that done and it's set and you're good and you can resupply yourself and anybody that you choose to arm in your house or that you actually trust and care about, then worry about all the other stuff. But gun culture, if you want to call it that, which is a terrible phrase, but like the NRA and all these people, they just want you to buy a bunch of guns. They don't care that your magazines aren't interchangeable. They don't care that you have no ability to like hot swap ammo and mags with your neighbors and with people that you might actually have to help out or might have to help you. They don't care. It's just like guns going out the door being sold to them.
Well, and the other thing too is that like you can throw a 1 to 10 on a 20-inch AR. Like don't underestimate the the capabilities of like an XM193 coming out of a 20-inch barrel with like with a nice piece of glass on it.
Yep. And having, so when I say an armory concept, like in an ideal world, you would have as many identical rifles as you wanted, and then start branching out from there and having like upper receivers that are set up that you could just pull 2 pins and swap on your long barrel or your short barrel or your different caliber or whatever into that platform, that rifle, that AR, so that you could do different things and not have to worry about like changing out all your mag pouches, going and grabbing a whole different setup to like go do work with. It's kind of same. And then also having all these other things for niche tasks like squirrel hunting and pest control and hunting and long range precision shooting and shooting down birds and drones, like shotguns, stuff that might actually be useful for other things. But that's kind of what I'm talking about. So moving on, magazines, specifically talking about 5.56 AR-15s. You're looking at stainless steel, aluminum magazines that have been accepted and approved by the Department of Defense, or as close to the reliability of a magazine that's been accepted for use by the Department of Defense. Why? Because those people have a ton of time and a ton of money to test those magazines with a bunch of different kinds of guns. And if you're building or buying an AR-15 that is trying to be as close to or better than a Department of Defense service carbine or service rifle, it shouldn't have any problem using the magazines that are designed to fit in those said lowers and work with those uppers. So you're talking about stainless steel and aluminum magazines from a few different companies, and then Magpul Gen 3 PMags. If you got a bunch of Gen 2 PMags or Gen 1 PMags, like, run them, dude. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. But if you were like, man, I don't have any magazines, and they're probably going to ban magazines. You know what? Magazines are still really plentiful, and they haven't gone up extraordinarily in price. I should buy a case of mags. What mag should I buy for my AR-15, right? Like, you could get 2 or 3 buddies together and all go halvesies or 3-way or 4-way on a case of mags. So which mags are you going to get? There's a gazillion people making magazines out there. Again, you're going to want something that's reliable and works. I like stainless steel mags because they are very corrosion resistant. They're very durable. And if you should ever damage one, talking to some machinist buddies of mine and some welder buddies of mine, it's a little bit easier to reform and reshape a damaged stainless steel magazine than it is an aluminum magazine. And it's certainly easier than trying to like duct tape back together and like JB weld a polymer magazine back together. If you go back to like the 94 assault weapons ban, from 94 to 2004, dudes were selling like form jigs that you would put in your bench vise, and you would like take the body of an old magazine and like push it down over that form to reshape it back to the correct straight size so that you could reuse a broken magazine. Having an old aluminum or stainless steel magazine that you can beat back into shape, re-weld a hole, whatever you need to do. Yeah, exactly. You can take that and fix all the little bends and little cracks and little issues, put a new spring in it, put a new Magpul self-leveling follower in it, and you got a magazine that's almost as good as new. Yeah, that's an old black follower mag. Yep. So this is the other thing. Don't be sentimental with your magazines. Magazines are like tires, right? Like, nobody keeps, this was the first set of tires I ever bought, and like the tread's all gone and I can't use it anymore and it doesn't work, but I have stacks and stacks of my old tires that I've taken off my car. Most of us do not do that. Now, if you're doing that for some practical purpose because you shred the rubber and use it for something, like, yeah, whatever. But don't keep a bunch of old magazines around that don't work. Fix them or trade them to somebody who wants to like swim through their pile of old broken magazines and go get some brand new ones that will actually work. Stockpile up some good magazines. In a gunfight, somebody throwing you a fresh, fully loaded magazine, you don't know how good of a feeling that is to when you don't have any more loaded magazines on hand and somebody hands you a stack of loaded mags. And knowing that those mags will work in your gun, that's a really good feeling. Being without any magazines, without any ammunition in them, is a really bad feeling. I have personal experience in this, and you don't want to have that feeling. It's not good. And that's in a situation where like there is a supply chain and everybody around you is running the same types of firearms and running the same types of magazines, and you can just go and grab another mag and load it into your gun and go. So that's what I'm trying to like get people to start thinking about if they are not already thinking on those lines. So the next thing is a sling. If you have an AR-15, it should have a sling. It may not necessarily need to be attached to the sling all the time, but have a good 2-point sling for your AR-15. You can make your own. You can buy one. There's a ton of good adjustable 2-point slings on the market. Blue Force Gear. I can't even think. There's a ton of different ones out there.
Viking Tactical is a really good one too. I like that one.
Yep, the VTAC sling from Viking Tactics, Faro Concepts. I'm trying to think where this one is. I got this sling here. Lunar Concepts. There's a bunch of different ones.
The ones that you can, in a pinch, pull the ripcord to pull tight to your chest, hop a fence, and then pull the paracord to re-engage is like, you know.
SOB, Sheriff of Baghdad down in Texas, John Shrek McPhee. He makes a really good sling. Yeah, there's dude, you can make your own. There's like tutorials online. I've made my own slings before when I didn't get issued a good sling, and so I had to make my own. So like you can do it. It's not that hard. But when you need a sling, you want it to be adjustable and you want it to be a 2-point. Not 1 point, not 3-point, 2-point all the way. If you have a box of old 3-point slings, you can convert those into 2 points. If you have a 1-point sling, you kind of can convert it into a 2-point by cutting one end of the loop and then attaching something to the other end, but it's probably at that point not going to be adjustable. But it might be. If you got an adjustable 1-point and you cut the non-adjustable end and then add a Fastex buckle or a hook or just some 550 cord that you can loop through the QD so you don't have all the noise and stuff. There's a ton of good ways to do it. Don't think you don't need a sling. You do need a sling, and it should be an adjustable 2-point sling. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy expensive. It literally can be something you made from scrap pieces of strap and whatever you want, right? 550 cord and duct tape. But make it adjustable and make it 2 points.
Single points will just whack you in your junk.
Yep. Single points were kind of cool back when everybody was running MP5s, but even then they weren't that cool. Because if you needed to like bring the gun in close and tie it tight to your body and climb over a fence, you had basically 2 options. Have that thing sandwiched between you and flopping all over the place, catching the magazine and the sights on the edge of the fence or the wall that you're trying to get over, or as you're trying to climb up a tree or something, or have it on your back and have it swinging all over the place, bumping into things. That's just not a good idea. If you want to know why 3-points suck, there's like a video on YouTube, or there used to be a video on YouTube of a French dude trying to like get into a 3-point sling so he could like get kitted up for the big game to like go save some hostages or something. And the dude's like, they literally could have had like the Clown Cars music going on in the background, like dun 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 dun. Like it was just like this whole epic craziness trying to like get into that thing. That's how every 3-point sling works. Terrible.
Yeah, I think like for me, think of the sling as the holster for your rifle, right? You don't have to set it down. If you get an engagement, like like a physical engagement, there's just so many opportunities where like if you don't have a sling on your long gun, it has to be occupying at least one of your hands, or it has to be relieved from your hands, which both are dangerous.
Yep. And not only that, but you also can do something with a sling that you can't do with a holster, and that is wrap up in it and get into a tighter, stable position for shooting.
Yeah.
So working around barricades, working around cover, working around concealment, around vehicles, standing, sitting, kneeling, where you don't have anything to rest the rifle on or AR on, being able to wrap up in a 2-point sling and get into a very stable shooting platform to take some very precise shots at distance can work well. Rittenhouse used a single-point sling pretty well. Would a 2-point sling have worked any less well? Curious what Dorito thinks about that.
I just thought it was funny. I had to bring it up.
It is funny. Yeah, so like that's the other thing. People will point to an instance where something that categorically does not work as well happened to work. I don't think homie won or lost that one based off of what sling he had, based off of all the footage that I've seen of it.
Yeah, that was
Dude,
training. That was a clean
yeah.
shoot with training.
But yeah, 2-point would work just as well as a 1-point in that situation. Like that whole thing wasn't won or lost over what kind of sling he had, but it could have been. So let's talk about sights. The thing needs to have some way to aim and shoot. I can't tell how many times I've seen people come up to a range and they bought a brand new toy, and that's what I'm calling it, because that's basically how they're treating it. So it's just a toy, right? Just something I go to the range with and make holes and noise with. And they have no sights on their gun, or they have sights but they're mounted incorrectly, backwards. Like literally people putting scopes on backwards. Like I had a dude one time ask me, I was working at a range, and the dude's like, "How far away are those targets?" And I'm like, 100 yards. He's like, "Man, it seems a lot further away." I'm like, "It might help if you had your scope flipped around the other way," because he's literally like looking through it like a freaking microscope. So like know how to set your stuff up, whether it's iron sights or an optic. And at a minimum, you need either iron sights or a reliable optic or both. So I'm sure I'm going to catch some hate. Like, what? You would have a gun with no backup sights? Like, yeah, I would. Because do you know what people had for backup sights in the 1970s? If your iron sight broke, you just didn't have sights. So if your red dot or your optic breaks, then you just don't have sights. And that sucks. But very, 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 very few instances of people that have like taken around through their scope and then had the time to like twist off the knobs or take the QD lever and take the scope off and then flip up the rear sight and then shoot. If things are that bad, probably talking about stuff happening relatively close to you, in which case you will not have time to like screw around with any of that stuff. But again, if you want to have both, like have both. If you want to have like your candid 45-degree red dot and then an LPVO, the piggyback 45, and then like some flip up irons underneath and then a visible laser, like dude, have 7 pairs of sights in your gun. But at a minimum, you need to have either iron sights or a reliable optic or both. And then from there, it's just gravy. Like have as many additional ways to like shoot and aim the gun as you want. But if you don't have any way to sight your rifle in or your AR-15 in, that's a problem. Like you got to have something on there.
Just to throw something in really quickly, something that I see all the time, and I've seen it since I worked in the industry to today, to all the pictures that you see online. When you mention the scope being put on backwards, is iron sights, flip up iron sights, put on backwards. Magpul, BUIS, put on backwards. Well, I guess they're polymer, but you know, if you see somebody that has iron sights put on backwards, don't bust their chops. Well, you could bust their chops for a second, but to show them how to properly put them on, show them, you know, which slots to, like, you know, help our brothers and sisters that don't know as much.
So I actually ran into a dude that had his sights put on backwards intentionally and understood that he was doing it intentionally. And he understood that when he needed to move the impact right and he looked at the little thing that said turn this way for right, he had to go the other way around. And he was running his flip up sight in front of his optic because it wouldn't fit behind in order to like have the optimal eye relief for his eyesight. So he was like, "Hey man, my scope is my primary method of aiming. I don't use the backup sights until I need to. They're backup sights. So I don't care that I've moved my rear sight a couple of inches forward in front of the scope. And in order to like fit it on the gun, he flipped it around the other way, like his rear sight specifically flipped it around the other way. And he knew how to zero it and adjust it. And he knew that everything was backwards and upside down from where it should be when he's like clicking his windage and his elevation and stuff. But most people that are doing that don't know what they're doing. They haven't like put that much thought into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like know how to mount your stuff. Don't trust that the person that you bought your firearm from knew what they were doing either. You'd be surprised how many like minimum wage high school and college kids are working in the back of gun shops, like slapping stuff on guns, not knowing what they're doing bore sights, mounting optics. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a gun scope that was mounted professionally where they like turned the scope 90 degrees So like the elevation turret is like the other way, and now it's basically your backwards upside down windage, and your windage is now your back. Like I've seen some weird stuff, man.
All backwards.
Yep.
Armitage said, thoughts on non-illuminated optics. I like them because there's less to break, but interested in other ideas. I have something on that to add to if you do as well.
Yeah, definitely. So like vortex sparks. My cat's meowing. He won't shut up. Vortex spark optics. They have a little solar panel on top, like some of the Holosuns do. And my understanding is, from what I've seen, I know for a fact on the Holosuns it'll do this. But if you pull the battery completely out and you go outside in broad daylight, you will still get a dot. That doesn't do you any good when it's nighttime and there's no big ball of fire in the sky that will illuminate your optic. But when we're talking about something like an Aimpoint T1, T2, Vortex Spark, Holosun, all these like micro red dot optics where the battery life is measured in years, and you can buy a blister pack of batteries right now at your local, corner drugstore that'll last you for 10 years. There's nothing. I'm not going to like get upset at some dude who's like, hey man, that's the sighting system that I have on my gun, and it's what I like and whatever else. Like, hey man, like worst case scenario, we have some kind of crazy solar eclipse that lasts forever and an EMP, and all the batteries are unavailable. I guess you'll have to go find some iron sights to put on your gun. So, if you're planning for that worst case scenario, like have all the non-illuminated backup iron sights you want. I've got out on this one, I've got a Vortex 1-6, and it's got crosshairs, whether there's battery in it or not. But I turn a dial and I can illuminate the center dot. But it works battery, no battery, day or night, either way, just fine. There's some cheaper prism optics out there that are like in that $150 to $350 range. I've never really messed with those too much. But hey, man, if you like them and they hold zero, then you do you, boo boo. The biggest downside to some of these like lower price and even higher price like prism optics is the eye relief isn't as good, and sometimes the quality of the glass, like looking through it, it may be a little distorted. So if you're in some kind of a weird position, like shooting underneath a vehicle or doing some weird stuff like that, which may not be so weird when like bullets are snapping past you and the only thing that you have to like get behind is something like that, like a culvert pipe or a car or a truck or a fence post or a tree or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Now like holding the gun at a weird angle to like not get shot, but see what's going on or send rounds where it needs to go. And you've got like a 1.5 inch eye relief on your ACOG or your prism scope, and that's not going to be helping you out at all. So the more forgiving your eye relief is and your eye box is, generally speaking, the better off you're going to be in some of those more realistic worst case scenarios. I'm less concerned about an EMP and like the never ending solar eclipse and never being able to find batteries again than I am the very real possibility that like we own a gun because one day we might have to use a gun type mentality of like needing to get behind the thing really quickly and shoot accurately. And if you've got an 1.5 inch eye relief and a terrible eye box where you have to have your eye just so in order to see through the sights, you're going to run into that situation well before you're going to run into the situation of I can't find batteries, the EMP hit, and the solar vortex, eclipses upon us.
I will say that so I'm the guy like on that. That's my 10-3. It just looks long because the can. I had an aim point go down, completely down, and I've never broken an aim point. I've never broken an ACOG, a Trigicon, but this has had like thousands and thousands. I mean, over 10,000 rounds through it, and it's a Comp M4, and the knob just became loose, and the screw is stripped. So
which knob are you talking about? Elevation and windage or mounting?
The on off 1 through 10, 1 through 9
Gotcha.
settings. So that you can wiggle it, and the reticle will turn on, and then the moment you fire, it goes out. So
Yep.
I talked.
That is a known issue with a few different aim points.
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens because they send out a bad unit. Sometimes it happens because people don't have their optics mounted correctly to the gun. I'm not saying that's what was happening with yours, but if you think about it, if you mount the optic tight and forward against the rail in the little Picatinny slot, when the rifle moves rearward, the scope is trying to move forward. It's like counterintuitive. You'd think like, well, the rifle recoil or the AR-15 recoil is going this way. You know, that little bit of push with 5.56 that we're shooting, it's going this way. So that means the scope's going this way too. No, the scope's going the other way. Don't take my word for it. Like, look it up yourself, but it's true. So when you mount an optic into your rail, you loosen all the stuff up, set it in, slide it all the way forward, hold it tight, and then tighten your mounting stuff down. If you don't, every time you fire, that optic's doing this. It's just bouncing back and forth just a little bit. And it may not even be enough to where you notice like a substantial shift in your zero. It's like, oh, it's still kind of in there. You know, it's holding that 4-minute group or whatever at 100 yards. But if that thing's doing that every time you shoot, you're basically like recoil testing that optic every time you shoot the gun, on top of the amount of recoil that it's designed to withstand over long periods of use. So whether you're talking about an aim point, an EOTech, Holosun, a primary arms, a Vortex, whatever it is, like make sure your stuff is mounted correctly, because you can prematurely damage something by not mounting it correctly. I'm not saying that's what happened to yours, because I have heard of people having that issue at their aim points where something breaks.
Yeah, that's weird, and I'm not the original owner, so the lifetime warranty doesn't apply to me. But I will say that one of the best. So this is what I'm going to move to shortly, eventually, is the prism scope with the etched reticle, just like a traditional like LPVO, because like you said, no matter what, batteries or not, your reticle is etched in there. You have a bullet drop compensator, and you can literally use it as a rangefinder on a human silhouette sized target to see how far out they are. That is priceless. My red dot doesn't do that. So, you know, I'm going to pick up a 3x prism scope with, you know, long eye relief. Maybe like.
So I'm not like paid by anybody in the gun industry at all, but I do like Vortex stuff because of their warranty. Now, is that going to be around when Vortex isn't around? I don't know. But like, you could find a Vortex optic on the side of the road and it had been driven over by a semi truck, and like can't figure out who the original owner is. And you can call Vortex up and be like, hey, I've got this scope and it's like smashed to smithereens. I found it on the side of the road, ran over by a truck. And they'll be like, send it in. What's your address? We'll send you a brand new one. Like, they take care of their customers.
As long as you have a piece of the optic left, like
you got a piece of the optic left. You're like, So Vortex is really good about that. I wish they made their stuff in house. I wish they were employing American workers on all of their optics. Some of their optics are made in the United States, like their the big mailbox one, the Huey, the UH1 Gen 2. That thing's made in the United States. But just like an EOTech, the battery life is going to suck. Like every month you're going to have to change that battery out. So getting off sights for a little bit, we can hit that later if you guys want. Light. Your AR-15 needs to have some way to be able to shoot in the dark and hit what you're aiming at. Be able to see what you're aiming at. If you can't see it, you probably can't hit it. So for most of us, that's going to be some type of white light. Do yourself a favor and don't buy Olight flashlights. If you are curious why, look up all the different lawsuits of people that have literally died using Olight flashlights. I'm not talking about like they tried to turn their flashlight on and it didn't turn on and then they got shot. Like, dude, like scratching their head with their Olight flashlight and the thing exploded and killed them. Another dude was holding the flashlight in his mouth, like looking at paperwork, pointing the light down, and it blew up in his face and killed him. Like, you want to talk about like a flashlight to completely avoid Olight flashlights like the plague.
Really?
For like $20 more than a given product that you can find with Olight, you'd probably pick up a Streamlight.
Never
And
heard
really,
that. That's crazy.
you can look it up, dude. Like there's a bunch of people on YouTube pimping Olights because they're getting paid big money to talk good thing about Olight flashlights. They're just as good as Surefire. They're just as good as Streamlight. Like how many people have died because their Streamlight and Surefire light exploded and killed them? Like, get back to me with that one.
Here's what I said, and I'm glad I'm learning this. I'm gonna look into it a little bit, but people always ask, like, why do you? And I don't shit on Olight. I just said, like, it's not at this point tested enough for me to get one of them because there is no gear for Olights, right? Like, I can't very easily go grab a setup like I can for a Glock with a TLR or a Glock with an X300 or whatever. Like, I need it simple and I need to be able to go light, like to trusted gear quick. You can bring up your kitty cat if you need to, man. Yeah, Streamlights. I got the same Streamlights that I bought when I was a kid, dude. Like literally, like before HL was even a thing, and they still.
I've broken a Streamlight before. I actually broke it with a number 2 pencil eraser. I had a holster that was designed to attach a TLR. I think this was a TLR 1S. It was back when everybody thought that like you wanted a strobe on your white light, which you don't want a strobe on your white light. But I had one. I bought into the hype. I bought one, and I was gonna go use my pistol, which at that time was a FN 509. This was some years ago, and I don't even have that gun anymore. But I had the TLR1 on there, and I was going to use that gun in a different holster, and that holster wouldn't take the TLR1. It was just a standard holster. So I take the TLR1 off, and I put it back inside the light-bearing holster for storage. Like I knew I wasn't going to lose both of those, right? Like I could put that up on top of my dresser, and I wasn't going to lose the light. And so I set it in there, and I come back from a range trip or something, and I went to take the light out, and I shook the holster, and the light wouldn't come out. So I'm like looking into this holster, like I can't get this thing out. I couldn't get my finger in there, and a little hole in the bottom. So I took a number 2 pencil eraser and I poked it through the front of the light, and I literally pushed on it like this hard on the lens, and it cracked the lens with the pencil eraser. I was like, "What?" Like, but to their credit,
that's crazy.
I found a local distributor of Streamlight products, and they replaced it like same day, like no questions asked. They were like, "Yeah, sure, give us your broken one. Here's your new one." Like that easy. Again, though, warranties are great until the thing that you have doesn't work and you're nowhere near a distributor or a dealer or a mailbox. Like, so there is something to be said for like the best warranty is never needing a warranty.
Yeah, it's the same people that say like, "Oh my God, like I love Taurus. Their warranty is great." Yeah, well, you're gonna do it,
Yeah, you're gonna use it. You're gonna find out how good it is.
Yeah.
So, like, if I were if someone was coming to me and like, "Hey Joe, buy once, cry once," like the whole cliche, right? For a white light for a long gun, for some kind of AR-15, probably looking at the Cloud Defensive Rain. It has way more performance than any of the Surefire stuff for about the same price, especially if you catch it on like a coupon code or a discount or something. It runs off of standard batteries and rechargeable batteries. So you can use like the little Surefire Streamlight CR123 alphas, or you can run it off like a big vape pen rechargeable 18650. It's like the sun on the end of your gun. Yep. And it comes with all the stuff to mount it to Picatinny or M-LOK. Comes with the pressure switch, or you can use the tail cap. It comes with everything you need in the box. It's expensive. Yeah, sure. We're going to get into this later, but like the dude that had to equip himself for the militia back in the 1790s, that rifle or that musket that he had, that thing cost a lot too. Like in today's dollars, it was like, oh, he only spent $20 on that thing. Yeah, that was like a month's pay. Like homie shelled out in like 1/12 of his yearly income for that gun. Yeah, so like a couple $100 for a flashlight in the grand scheme of things, unless you're like living under a bridge and making $4 an hour or unemployed or something like that. Shoot, if you're unemployed and you're using communist unemployment, you're probably making more money than I am. But
if you're living under a bridge, there's no reason why you can't get
you got no bills, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like get good stuff while you can still get good stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully the good stuff that you get also has warranty. So while the grid's still up, while the supply chains are still up, if something happens to your stuff, you can fix it and get it fixed. But if all that stuff goes away and you're relying on your warranty to save you, man, that's not going to be a fun situation to be in. That's going like right back to the like showing up to the party with some weird gun that takes some weird mag and some weird caliber.
You're gonna be
Yay.
like a weird guy standing in line at that like shop in Book of Eli where he's like trading like unique what did he trade? Something crazy to charge his iPod. I forgot what he traded, but it was something crazy. Anyway,
yeah,
bridge line.
So get a white light. You need something to be able to shoot and identify your target out to 100 meters. Why 100 meters? Or 100 yards, if you want to use yards. That's generally speaking where we zero our rifles at in the daytime. It's the distance at which we know that if we line our sights with that target, our bullet will hit there. So if your white light can't reach out to 100 yards or 100 meters and identify the target and what they have in their hand and what they're doing and what they're up to, then you can't take that shot. So a lot of the expensive and inexpensive white lights can't do that. So do some research and figure out what kind of light you would need to be able to punch through some fog, a little bit of light drizzle, a little bit of smoke, and see somebody at 100 yards and see what's in their hands so you can decide if that's somebody that you need to be fighting or not fighting. At a minimum, that's what you should be going for. There are white lights out there on the market today, like the Cloud Defensive Rain, like the Mod Light stuff, like some of the Surefire and some of the Streamlight stuff. And if I'm not mentioning your favorite brand and I don't know about them, I'm sorry. There's too many to keep track of these days.
Olight all the way. Olight.
Yeah. Blow up in your face.
Dude, light would go nuts hearing you say that you don't like Olight.
Hey man, I don't get sponsored by them, so I got no reason to say anything good about them.
Shit, I get no money from any gun company.
Same.
To this day, I've only paid gun companies.
It sucks that it comes back to money, right? If we could take money out of the equation and I could say, okay, this thing does this and this thing does this, which one do you want? You'd be like, oh, I want the one that does the more things. Yeah, like that'd be great. And you could just pick option A or option B. Like you'd then be asking yourself, why does option B even exist? Like, but because there's this stupid thing called money, then we all get sucked into like, well, I'm too good to own this cheap thing. And then the other extreme opposite into that is like, oh, you snobs owning the fancy stuff. It's like, look, man, get something that works and not works most of the time or you think works. Like get something that provably works in the largest sample size possible. Don't go with, man, the guy at the gun counter said he likes his and it was on sale and I turned it on and it turned on and I turned it off and it turned off and I've been carrying it in my pocket for the last 3 months and so far so good. Like this thing right here is a piece of life-saving equipment. It's not a window decal. I'm sorry. I told you it was a window decal. It's not. It's meant to do a task. And so treat it as such. If you were going to go like if you were a fisherman and you were going to go like catch crabs or something off the coast of Alaska, you wouldn't be like trying to go buy the cheapest life vest you could find. You would buy a life vest that worked. Right? That would be like the most critical criteria. Like, will this thing keep me afloat out here in the ocean for as long as I'm afloat? Moving on. White lights. Next is muzzle devices. A2 flash hider and or a suppressor. Some kind of flash hider and or a suppressor. Why? The biggest thing that a suppressor does for you is the biggest thing that a flash hider does for you, and that is hide flash. even on a well-lit day, if a bunch of dudes get up in some buildings or some trees and start shooting at you with a muzzle brake or a comp or a bare muzzle, you are going to be able to see that very easily. An A2 flash hider, or a flash hider that is styled like an A2, is closed on the bottom, and then it has open ports on the top. So when the round leaves the muzzle and you have all that burnt and unburnt powder and that flash at the end of the muzzle, it's all being directed upward. It's being minimized by those cuts. And if you're low to the ground, it's not going to be kicking up a bunch of dust and creating dust signature, which is another thing that gives your position away. So a simple like $4, $5, $6, $7 A2 flash hider is about the best thing running for minimizing muzzle flash. If you're not going to run a muzzle flash hider, then run a suppressor, because that's either the next best thing or the best thing, depending on which can you're talking about, for reducing flash and dust signature. So one of those or both of those. I've got a 6315 mount, so it's basically mimicking an A2 flash hider, but it also lets you slide a suppressor over it and ratchet it down. Surefire's got some stuff like that. Pretty much any company worth their salt making suppressors for actual serious use, not just like hunting or shooting at the range or taking pictures for Instagram. Any of those companies, Yankee Hill Machine, any of those guys, they're going to make some kind of muzzle device that'll let you attach your suppressor to it that's going to mimic an A2 flash hider. Closed on the bottom, open ports on the top, designed to minimize flash. It also reduces a little bit of muzzle climb if you're really getting after it and shooting it really, really fast. Not by much, because we're still talking about a 5.56, but every little bit helps, right? So that's pretty much it for muzzle devices.
I got the AAC FPN6, and it's 7.25 inches of literal pure steel, and a lot of the stuff I got like a while back.
Yeah.
Peace out, Zapov. So yeah, it's a shitty time to buy guns and equipment, but you don't have,
Here's the thing. Let's say you had 10 guns, and let's say not one of those 10 was anything remotely close to any of the stuff we've talked about. It's not an AR, not in 5.56. You don't have a bunch of reliable mags. You don't have a sling. You don't have sights. The thing isn't zeroed. You don't have a white light. Okay. If you took 5 of those guns or 6 of those guns, you could trade that towards 1 or 2 of these. Well, then I have less guns. Okay. Well, if you've got 4 different size tires for your car, you're not meeting the minimum. You need 4 tires that are all basically kind of sort of the same size, so you can get places in your car or your truck. So if you're trying to set up a fighting weapon, like this is kind of some of the stuff you need to start looking at.
I think people's excuses are that, oh, well, I use my car every day during civility, right? So, I need to have 4 tires. I don't need to have well, imagine if you did, right?
Yeah.
We always say, like, the one day that you flip the light switch and the lights don't come on, you open up the faucet and water doesn't come out. You look at your cell phone and the service has the big X. Like, that's what we're talking about in an exchange where you would absolutely need to count on your rifle or your equipment, or you'll die.
Yeah. And so like it starts to cause people like some emotional pain, and they start getting upset about some of this stuff. And I might be completely wrong. I'm just going off of what I've learned from some very educated people, and what I've learned through some of my own life experience, and what I've learned through some of my own research and self-education on this, about this topic, about this subject. And if people don't want to do it, like, that's fine too. Like, At the end of the day, I want everybody to be as well equipped and well regulated as possible, because that's kind of the first part of the Second Amendment. If we're not all on the same page, if we don't have a good plan, this at least gets maybe the conversation started and gets people thinking about setting up an armory and not a gun collection. Nothing wrong with collecting guns, man. Like, I know people that do that instead of like throw their money into a retirement fund. Like, I worked with a plumber who had bought a Colt M16 in the 1980s before the 86 ban. He paid like $750 for it, and then the $200 tax stamp. So he was in it for like $1,000. And this was like 7 years ago. I was working with this dude, 8 years ago. And he was like, yeah, I got it appraised recently at like an auction place. I wanted to see how much it was worth. For $50,000, dude. I'm like, holy crap, man. Like,
Colt.
Yeah, and just a regular old Colt, SP1 type gun, like M16A1 setup that was full auto.
You can find them for 25 to 30K, but like if you're in that game, but if it's like an all matching Colt, like which most of them back then were, because anyone could build a machine gun back when freedom. I mean, even then there was still the NFA, but
freedom-ish.
Yeah.
So like I'm not trying to like tell people like don't have a gun collection, don't like guns just for the sake of liking guns. Like, no, that's cool and everything, but like get your priorities straight. Understand why we have the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not designed to protect your meme gun collection. It's not designed to protect your hunting rifle. It's not designed to protect your self-defense gun. It's designed to encourage every military-aged fighting male to be equipped with a military weapon, as close to a military weapon as they can get, or better. If you don't have that set up, then my question to you is why? Why don't you? Why haven't you prioritized that? Why do you not look at that as a life priority? Because we all get told all the time, like, shall not be infringed and right to keep and bear, and like they only harp that stuff. They don't want to talk about like there needs to be a good plan. It needs to be well thought out. It needs to be efficient, and it needs to work. And all that other stuff is just like icing on the cake. Like the ability to have a concealed carry pistol, like what I have on right now, or an open carry pistol, or a 22 to go shoot squirrels in the backyard with. Like that's all just gravy, man. That's just extra stuff. Like because we have the ability to own military guns, then certainly we have the ability to own lesser guns, like guns that are not strictly there for a martial purpose. So then the next thing I got is ideally, if you had all this stuff that we talked about, reliable, accuracy, modular, interchangeable, caliber 5.56, magazines, sling, sights, light, mobile device, talking about a way to shoot without emitting visible light in the dark. So whether that's night vision or night vision on the rifle or thermal, ideally, if you could, you would want to have this. Why? Because every military across the globe right now is equipping their frontline and rear line troops with night vision on their face or on their rifle or thermal, because there's 24 hours in a day, and a lot of those hours are spent in darkness. I was in a farm and ranch store a couple of years ago. It's a pretty big size building. It's maybe like a quarter of the size of half the size of like a super Walmart, right? So it's not some tiny little hole in the wall shop. And I was in there in broad daylight, like 2 p.m. on a weekend, and all the lights went out. It was like you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. So it doesn't just get dark in the nighttime, like power outages, grid down scenarios. Imagine having to go into a building. Imagine having to go into a sewer pipe. Imagine having to go into a long culvert pipe, or into a house, or into a basement, or into a cave, and like not being able to see. And maybe in some of those situations, you wouldn't want to just be like, walking around shining a flashlight everywhere you go. So again, ideally, moving towards prioritizing your fighting setup and then worrying about all the other stuff. I would rather, if I could be like king for a day, I would rather every military age male in the United States have like 4 identical AR-15s with 20 loaded mags for each gun, some type of reliable optic, a sling, all this stuff that we talked about, and have some type of night vision and some way to shoot with it at night, then there to be 10 times as many other types of guns out there in the wild floating around. Because at that point, every single military age fighting male has his own armory and is going to be like, as long as he gets good training and practices with his stuff, he's going to be super effective. That would be a horrifically dangerous opposing force. If you were like, oh, let's go invade mainland United States, the Department of Defense doesn't exist anymore. Oh, crap. Every male 18 to 45 has got 4 identical AR-15s with 20 loaded mags apiece, body armor, night vision, thermals, a suppressor for each gun. Like, that would be that would be like a fighting force that nobody would actually want to go up against. And that's kind of the whole point of the Second Amendment, is like opposing an invading or a tyrannical force from within. And so what would be the most effective tool for that? Pound for pound, the most effective weapon that you can carry with your 2 hands and run yourself and not like have a crew serve thing is an AR-15. That's why everyone's trying to ban it. They're not going after all these other guns. Why? Because they're not as effective. Why would they go after hunting guns? Why would they go after shotguns? Why would they go after all these other guns? They're going after AR-15s and guns that are close to AR-15s. And so that's why you need to get as many good AR-15s as you can possibly, manage to acquire, and then be good with them and have them set up correctly. Having a room full of like 30 AR-15s and none of them are zeroed and none of them have mags and you don't have ammunition and you don't have sights, you don't have, them set up correctly. I mean, I guess you've got, stuff to trade and barter, but you can't like grab them and go do work with them. So I've got some things to avoid. How are we doing on time, man? We're like losing people left and right. Everyone's falling asleep.
No, actually, we're increasing in viewership, and
Cool.
we're at 2 hours and 7 minutes. I don't have a whole lot of time left here.
Okay.
But I think the
I'll
last
speed through this.
hit is most important.
So these are some things you want to avoid. Out of spec parts. If you don't understand how spec and out of spec works, there's a really good source for this on the internets, and it's called SOTAR, School of the American Rifle. It's a dude named Chad Albrecht. He's a gunsmith and an armor up in Maryland, of all places, near Baltimore, and he runs an AR-15 gunsmithing school. He apprenticed under a bunch of other dudes that were, up till him, kind of like the guys to turn to on all this type of stuff, like Will Larson and some of these other dudes that were experts at all this stuff. And he does videos where he'll bring in like some fancy schmancy AR-15 and he'll go through it and he'll show everything that's wrong with it and then describe how to fix it. He'll bring in some like, Anderson Arms or Palmetto State Armory gun, and it'll like be in spec. And you can see right there, like, every little thing that he's checking for to see like what makes these things work correctly. It's a super good resource. Some people get really down in the weeds on it and it upsets them. They're like, well, he just showed my favorite, brand and he didn't talk about them nicely, so I don't like this guy. Like, that dude isn't getting paid by any of these gun companies either. He's just working with the stuff in front of him and checking it to see if everything is set up correctly. And if it's not, he's describing in detail, usually, how to go about fixing it. So if you're like trying to figure out how to do this yourself, or if you're an armorer or a gunsmith, like, I have local gunsmiths to me that have been doing this for 10 years or longer, and they watch this dude's stuff, like, to try and figure out how to diagnose guns. Like, this dude didn't just come out of nowhere. He knows what he's talking about. The next thing to avoid, so avoiding out of spec parts, how to understand spec and out of spec, go watch School of the American Rifle, SOTAR. He's got stuff all over the internet. He teaches classes. I would love to go to one of that dude's classes because he goes way more in depth when you're there in person than when you're like watching a 45-minute YouTube video. The next thing to watch out for is snake oil sales pitches, like fancy coatings. Like, this gun's coated with this stuff, so you never have to put lube on it. It never gets dirty. It always works because we put this special paint on the gun or something like that, right? The TDP is the TDP for a reason, the technical data package. And if you have a gun that's built to the technical data package, assembled correctly and in spec, you don't need any of the fancy coatings and the fancy paints and the, lube 5000s, built into the molecular level of the aluminum to make the gun work. So don't fall for snake oil sales pitches. Most of the time, they're just that. They're snake oil. Next is
And even
to avoid.
If anyone does say anything like, "Oh, this NP3 doesn't need to be oiled," or "Oh, this brush chrome doesn't need to be oiled," still oil it.
Yeah, exactly.
I got NP3 and chrome stuff, and I run it. Depending on the gun, if it's a Glock, I'll run it dry sometimes, but with maybe a little bit of lube. But oil the shit.
Yeah. And we're talking specifically right now about AR-15s. There's other guns out there like Glocks that are kind of designed to run relatively dry. Like, you only need like 2 drops, 3 drops of oil on the whole gun. And I'm talking about like tiny little drops. Like, the more oil you put on a Glock, the higher chance you're going to have of like gumming some stuff up and not making it work in most instances. But specifically with ARs, like, don't fall for the snake oil sales pitch. The next 2 things to look for is lowest or highest price. If you walk into a gun shop and they somehow have 20 AR-15s in stock and you don't know anything about AR-15s aside from what you heard me and Dark talk about for the last couple hours, and you walk in there and you see this AR-15 on the wall for $399 and you see another AR-15 on the wall for $13,000, and they both look exactly the same. They don't have sights, they don't have lights, they don't have lasers, they don't have optics, they don't have suppressors. They're just AR-15s. Like, those 2 you probably want to steer away from because there's probably some messed up stuff on that $399 rifle that you're going to have to spend some more money to make it work. And if you're spending $13,000 on like a rack grade M4 equivalent, somebody is selling you a bag of goods, right? So again, if you're walking into a shop and they have a bunch of stuff in stock, generally speaking, stay away from the super, 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 super expensive stuff and the really, really, really low price stuff. Generally speaking, hey man, you might walk into a shop and find a Colt 6920 for $400. Probably not going to happen. You might. Maybe somebody doesn't know what they have, or they're just trying to get rid of it or whatever. But that's probably not going to happen to you. The next thing to watch out for is shiny components like stainless steel, TIN, silver and gold coatings and paints and all that type of stuff. It's for a martial purpose. If you wouldn't go on a foot patrol in a military context with the gun painted or done up like that, then don't prioritize those type of colors and components on a gun for a martial purpose. In the Revolutionary War, like the Minutemen and the militiamen there, they were doing like the polar opposite of the British troops. Like, British troops are marching out into lines of battle wearing bright red uniforms and polishing the barrels of their guns and their bayonets. Like, you could see a British soldier a ways off. And the colonial Minutemen and militiamen, they were like letting their barrels rust and like browning and bluing their barrels so that they were duller and darker tones, and like rubbing charcoal on them, not running 20-inch long shiny bayonets, like intentionally to try and blend in with their surroundings and not like catch the glare of the sun and attract attention their way. In keeping with that spirit, having a super tricked out gun with a bright yellow magazine in the gun, that's kind of like, duh, like, why would you do that? Having a gun set up like this, or, camouflage spray paint or whatever, and then having like a bright blue scope, why would you do that? Having, every time you pull the bolt carrier charging handle back and the ejection port pops open, you've got a bright, shiny, chromed bolt carrier group. Why would you do that? Get away from the shiny stuff if you can at all help it, If you're going to have some shiny stuff on the gun, like keep it to stuff that's like internal in the gun, like your buffer and your bolt carrier group and stuff that's not necessarily going to be like out there reflecting sunlight. Next thing you want to look out for is gimmicks. Bad levers from Magpul, cassette trigger packs from CMC triggers. There's a green reticles on optics. There's a bunch of things like this. They're just straight up gimmicks. Like unless you got some kind of like colorblind issue where you can't see red dots or red illuminated reticles, a green optic is not going to work as well as a red optic. Bad levers. There have been more people that have had negligent discharges and accidental shootings with a bad lever than is worth keeping that thing on the gun. There have also been people that have had malfunctions directly attributed to a bad lever. I used to run a bad lever. I had a bad lever on my M16A4 in combat in Afghanistan. I managed to never have an issue with it, but I know of people that did. The entire point of a bad lever is to speed up your reload and to be able to clear malfunctions quicker. If 50% of the reason that that thing exists is clear malfunctions quicker, but that thing also increases the likelihood that you're going to experience a malfunction, there's not really a good excuse for leaving it on the gun.
Yeah, Matt said they're called bad for a reason.
They're called bad for a reason.
Yeah,
there are dudes at Magpul that straight up are like, we're sorry that we made this. Like,
yeah.
It's not a good idea, guys.
Anything that lives in your trigger guard is generally a bad idea.
Yep.
I'll just say that.
Yep. So it is to rifles what Serpa holsters are to pistols. Like it's just not a good location for a lever to be located near where the trigger goes. That's just
and it changes your like. So if you have your motor functions are empty mag and then throw in your mag and whack the side of the receiver. The moment you change that and start programming something different, and then you need to pick up another gun, it's I don't mess with them. I don't like them.
Yep. And so there's other things that I didn't get into on this, but there's other things out there that are just very gimmicky. They're designed to let a fool and his money be easily parted. Like, give us some money so you can have this thing that will increase your split times or what. Usually it's junk. They're still selling that like rubber thing that slides over the end of your barrel that'll like decrease vibrations in your barrel and make your shot group shrink up. Like there's all kinds of weird stuff like that. Just stay away from it. It's not worth it. We already talked about this one, but this is a big one. Single and 3-point slings. Avoid them like the plague. They suck. Don't do it. Engravings, meme parts, bright colors. So like if you're looking at 2 stripped or complete lower receivers, right, at Jim Bob's pawn shop or something, and you're looking at these 2 things, and like this one's got like an engraving of like Ronald Reagan fighting a dinosaur, and this one's just says like Colt or Smith & Wesson or whatever your favorite brand is on the side, right? Don't pay extra for the one that's got the fancy engraving on it. We're talking about a Marshall tool here. We are not talking about a gun collection. We're not talking about a meme collection. We're not talking about baseball playing cards. We're talking about something that you might have to take another human life with. So like don't especially don't pay extra for something like that, right? That's dumb. Meme parts, like, again, my magazine catch looks like the guy from Family Guy. Like, come on, dude. Like, that's not what this is about, right?
Wait. Which guy?
Stewie.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah, right. Save that for your meme collection after you get your fighting setup done, and then you have all this extra time to like spend on dumb guns and dumb gun parts. Chinese-made parts. There are a ton of Chinese-made parts floating around on the market, and most of them suck. Specifically talking about like small parts, like triggers, buffers, springs, detents, lower parts kits. I don't know if they've gotten into making like bolt carrier groups and stuff yet, but almost all of it is terrible. SOTAR, the guy over at School of the American Rifle, which is what SOTAR stands for. He's demonstrated, I believe it was him, No, my local gunsmith demonstrated this thing where he took apart a bunch of different buffers and he showed what was inside the buffers. And then he talked about what buffers are actually designed for. And it's like a dead blow as it slides forward on the bolt carrier. It's designed to like push the bolt back into battery and then hold it there. And they pulled apart this Chinesium buffer, and it was like dust. It was just like full of like steel shavings in there. It's like, dude, that's not a dead, like, no, what are you doing? Like it wasn't designed correctly at all. And so you might be saving like $2 or $3 on a part that could make or break your gun working correctly. It's not worth it. Like, buy good quality stuff.
Someone mentioned something that was a great point. Let me go back over here.
Yep. I'm almost done, dude. I've got like 3 more things.
No, you're good. Oh, Joe Morris said, Chinese junk lurks in the sling mount pick rail realm for ARs. Guys, when you're like, going around gun shows and, where you don't find stamped or branded shit, and it's like $20 less or, 30, 50, $10 less, there's always a reason, right? You crack open you shotgun open an AR and, yeah, well, you know what I'm saying. Just be cautious about what you're buying, know what you're buying, and
yeah. And it's not just AR stuff, dude. I was at a gun shop recently, and I don't go to this shop very often, but they had a stack of made in China airsoft tourniquets for sale for like the same price as what you would pay for like a decent tourniquet. Like at that point, dude, like literally, like I wouldn't normally say this, but like at that point, literally, yeah, make your own tourniquet. Yeah. Like your homebrewed tourniquet is going to work better than the one that was made in like a sweatshop for airsofters. But getting back on track, we already talked about this. Sort of stay away from 223 chambers like Remington or Wild. If you're going to get a gun chambered in that, or if you already have a gun chambered in that, take it to a competent armorer or a competent gunsmith, have them headspace it. If they need to, ream the chamber out to 5.56 NATO specs. You will then allow your fighting rifle to work with the broadest variety of commercial and military spec ammunition that's on the market. I'm not talking about taking your like prairie dog coyote hunting rifle and doing this to it that, shoots 10 bullets to the same hole at 300 yards. There is a place for some of these other chambers. It's just not in a fighting gun. Complicated or proprietary parts, like, just stay away from it. Shouldn't have to elaborate on that. This one might hurt your feelings, Dark, so hang on. It's going to get rough.
I'm hanging.
BDC reticles on magnified optics.
I'm done. I'm leaving.
Yeah, bye. Dude, so I was issued and used a bunch of different Trijicon ACOGs. We're using M16A4s, M4s, and M4A1s. Most of the time, M16A4s and M4s, not M4A1s. Right? So we're basically using 2 guns from 2 manufacturers, FN and Colt, and we're using Lake City M855 or Mark 318 SOST. That's a very, very, very limited type of variability, right? We're not using 15 different flavors of ammunition. We're not using hundreds of different manufacturers of barrels. We've like limited it down to that narrow of a scope. And then we're using optics from the same manufacturer, Trijicon. Nobody's going to say Trijicon's a slouch at making a decent optic, right? Like their stuff is pretty reliable, right?
Mm-hmm.
The military spec'd out the reticle on that. It's a BDC reticle. Do you know how many times I lined up on a target 300 yards away, 300 meters away, and lined it up on the 3 mark and pulled the trigger and it was like dead on? Freaking never. Like, go up in elevation 2,000 feet, go down in elevation 2,000 feet, change the temperature 50 degrees one way or the other. Take that same optic and put it on a slightly shorter barreled gun. Change the ammunition from this bullet weight to this bullet weight. And none of those things line up. So then the only thing you have is the tip. You have the center point on the reticle, or the center point on the reticle. That's the only thing that's actually even close. Everything else, the further down you get down that line of hash marks, the less any of that stuff actually lines up with anything.
Yeah.
The only thing it's good for is ranging.
Yeah.
But even then, there's other ways to go about doing that, and there's other optic reticle styles that will allow you to range your target and not be tied into marks that are like unevenly spaced that don't actually relate to any actual distance, like set in 100 increments. So if you're going to go with like hash marks and tick marks and all kinds of stuff in your scope, mil dot or like a Horus reticle, or if you're like old school, MOA. But any of those type of options are going to work way, way, way better than a BDC reticle. If that's what you got right now, and that's the only thing you can afford, and like you can't allocate any more resources towards changing that stuff out, like I'm not saying take it and throw it in the trash, right? Like either try and trade out or trade up to something better. But if you're like, I have nothing and I need to get into this, stay away from the BDC reticles, because 99.9% of the time, the only thing that's actually going to line up is going to be the top post or the center crosshair. And at that point, you're literally gaining nothing over a red dot.
Damn, I just said that I was going to start getting into these, man. You're killing my dream.
Sorry, man. Dude, if we get a bunch of people to like bang on Vortex's door and Hollow Sun and Burris and whoever's making Prism Optics and be like, yo, dude.
Good BDC.
Yep.
So there's a new style of BDC with a rangefinder, which may be the same as Trajecon. I don't know. So I don't know enough about it. But the benefit I saw was that it is etched in the glass, like scope, to where it can run with or without batteries. That's my big.
Those are great. Those are great. Like having an etched reticle, having an actual crosshair, or some kind of reticle where when the battery goes out, you still have a way to aim. That's awesome. But the actual design of the reticle is the thing that kind of sucks. Like if you're comparing apples to apples, an etched reticle with a mil dot or a mil or an MRAD based reticle, where it's like equally spaced and this are the same, is going to be way better than the BDC version, because now you can take that optic and you can move it to a different barrel length or a different type of ammunition, and you can actually zero and get good data on where all those drops are and no holds and all that type of stuff. The BDC stuff just does not work as well as an MRAD based reticle. So again, this is my opinion from my experience. Other people, everyone can have their own opinion, their own experience on this stuff.
Yeah, I may still give it a shot, or at least get like a 1X with an etched reticle to be able to run something without batteries. But it is something you want to look into.
I might call Vortex and like talk to somebody and get their like name and number, and then just start like handing it out to people, like call Vortex, call
you get on the stream here and be like,
tell them to make an MOA, or I'm sorry, an MRAD based etched reticle, $250 prism scope that's like 4X or something. That's kind of my thing on that. The next one is optics mounted too low. So you'll see a dude that's got like low rings mounting his scope like a quarter of an inch above the top of his rail, and then he's trying to like do this through the scope to like see. At a minimum, you're going to want 1.5 inch mount. So like 1.48, 1.49, 1.54 mount, and then up from there. Once you get above 1.7, 1.8, there's some diminishing returns on a magnified optic, because you're going to end up doing like chin weld instead of cheek weld. For like standing up, running and gunning, the chin weld thing is actually pretty cool. Like a 193 mount, which is what this thing has, is an old 193 mount I got on there. But when you start going prone, it can get very uncomfortable very quick. So kind of the sweet spot is like the 1.7 range. Unfortunately, there's not too many places selling 1.7 mounts for LPVOs, but 1.7 equates to lower 1/3 co-witness. So when you're looking at a lower 1/3 co-witness Aimpoint or EOTech or Holosun or Vortex, that's roughly 1.7 inches from the top of the rail to the center of the optic. But if you're going down to like a 1.1 or a 0.8 height mount, you on an AR-15, you were going to have some like severe spinal like pain. It's not going to feel good.
Yeah, it doesn't look comfortable.
Yeah. Last but not least, and most critically important, the thing to avoid with an AR-15, any AR-15, is having a rifle that is not zeroed. It doesn't matter what you have on the gun. It doesn't matter what ammo you're running. It doesn't matter like how much money or how little money you spend on the thing. If it's not zeroed and it won't hold a group and it's not reliable, like you're toast. But you can't even know how accurate the gun is if the thing's not zeroed, right? Like I guess you could just fire it for a group and then not adjust your sights. But the next video that I'm going to do with you guys, I got to talk with you, Dark, offline, like figure out how we're going to work this. But we're going to do a drill where you get to test magazine, ammunition, and firearm reliability, both dry and live fire, function check, safety check, zero, and then look at how reliable or non-reliable a given rifle or pistol AR-15 is. So one more thing about the cost thing. I'm sorry, I forgot about this.
Really quick before you go into this, this was quite possibly one of the most fascinating things that I saw. Like if you want, so everyone on this channel, we look at patterns, right? Mm-hmm. Patterns over the last 5 decades, 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years. This is something that I found fascinating that still applies today. So, sorry.
Yep. So this will kind of hopefully tie everything and put it a little bit more in perspective on everything that we've talked about. I tried to go as far back as I could, and I couldn't find good data on some of the stuff. So if the audience, if you guys watching, if the crew here, if you guys know this and you could put it in the comments, or if you can spend the time researching it and find out, I would love to know. I could only go back to the 1860s on this where I could still find good data. What I was trying to find is what has the cost been for a fighting rifle in America throughout history. You have to find a definition for a fighting rifle. So I went with, what did the military issue? Well, who did they issue to? The infantry. So I tried to find the infantryman's rifle cost throughout history and then tried to tie that to some type of a constant. I wanted to go with like a working man's monthly wage. Like, did the rifle cost more than a working man's monthly wage? Less? Half? A third? Okay, well, whose monthly wage? I had to find something that was constant. Like, not a whole lot of blacksmiths running around. You guys have had one on the show, right? But like, most of us would have a tough time finding your local blacksmith in most places in the country. Not a whole lot of tanners, making saddles anymore. And then there's like jobs and industries now that didn't exist 200 years ago. Well, the one job that has existed for a really, 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 really long time is the infantry. As long as the United States has been a country, we've had conscripted or volunteer infantrymen that have been paid or were supposed to be paid some sort of monthly or yearly wage. And so that's what I tied this to, because it's somewhat of a constant down the board. So in 1861, the taxpayer, the United States government, paid $20 for an 1861 pattern Springfield rifle, 58 caliber muzzleloader. $20. They paid their corporals, an E4, $13 a month. The Confederate Army got paid around $11 a month. You had to get up to like a higher level sergeant before the guy was making more a month than what the rifle cost. So again, a corporal in the military in the 1860s was making less than what the rifle that he was carrying cost the taxpayer. Okay, well, maybe it was just a fluke, right? Fast forward a little bit. 1903, Springfield rifle, 30-06. It cost the taxpayer in 1917 $26. A corporal in the United States Army made $36. So now the tables have been flipped a little bit. Now the corporal's making $10 more a month than what the taxpayer paid for his rifle. but it's still relatively close to the same price. In World War II, 1942, an M1 Garand cost the taxpayer, cost the government, $83, and a corporal was paid $78. So now we're back again to where the corporal's making less money than what the rifle cost. We go to the 1960s, 1963, a terrible year. The M14 rifle cost $100, roughly. There was some contracts where they were making them for as little as like $77, and some contracts where they were making them for as high as like $122. So right kind of in the middle, about $100 a rifle. Corporals in 1963 in the Army and Marine Corps were paid $122.30 a month. We're like almost dead even here. Fast forward to 2021. The United States taxpayer, you, me, I'm assuming some of you guys pay taxes, right? Like, we kind of sucks, but we have to. Or maybe we don't. I don't know. That's your business. An M4 carbine cost the taxpayer right at about $1,000. On some of these contracts, they were picking them up for a little bit less, and on some of these contracts, they were picking up for a little bit more. An E4 in the Army and in the Marine Corps and in the Navy and the Air Force, because now it's all standardized. Like, it doesn't get changed branch by branch. It used to. Makes $2,330 a month. So they're paying the corporal they're paying him more than double what they're paying for his rifle. Now here's the catch. In 1861, the rifle, when it left the arsenal, would have like a bayonet and a sling. Here's your rifle. As long as you had ammunition, you could make that thing work. In 2021, when that rifle is leaving the factory and then showing up for receiving at a unit, it's going to have the rifle, a simple sling that's going to get rolled up and set into storage and never used because it's garbage. It's a non-adjustable 2-point sling, or not a quick adjustable 2-point sling. 3 magazines, and a cleaning kit, and a backup flip-up iron sight. But then what they're actually going to do to that thing before they issue it to somebody is put a laser on it, put an optic on it, give the guy a bunch of magazines, like all the stuff that he's going to need to actually run the rifle. So the actual cost of the rifle is higher than that $1,000 point. So by the time you factor in the cost of an optic and a laser and a bunch of mags and all this other stuff, we're right again, neck and neck, or the rifle costs more than what a corporal is paid. The whole point of this is to show that throughout history, a thing that you could trust your life or the lives of your units' lives to, that level of quality cost something. And it has roughly always equated to what we've been willing to pay a corporal monthly. And that is to say that money or no money, things that work, or at least supposed to work and expected to work, cost something. So when people start getting down in the dumps about, I don't have enough money, or that thing's too expensive, or why would I spend that amount of money, or I can get the same thing for less, quality costs what quality costs. And if you're like on the fence of, how do I get to this? Like, I'm not like a financial dude. Like, I'm not the guy to talk to on that. But if you need this type of equipment, you're gonna have to figure out a way to like figure it out to like get it. And trying to shortchange yourself by cutting corners when it comes to things like reliability and accuracy and compatibility with other people's parts and all this other stuff, that shouldn't be your first choice. If it's all you can bring, if that's all you can get, then like, dude, I would rather somebody be armed than not armed, right? I don't want to have like some kind of like standard of like where you have to be at in order to show up to the thing. If you pull up this, I think it's the 1795 Militia Act, they have a whole list of what the militia guys actually had to show up with. Can you pull something up, Dark, or no?
What would you like me to pull up?
Look up the 1795 Militia Act. I should have written this down. I'm sorry, dude. but I just thought of it.
1795 Militia Act.
Yep.
Okay, 1 second.
I think it's in the Wikipedia thing. If not, we can try something else.
No, we're good. I got my trusty. Dude, I typed this into Bing. How did. Wow, bro. Okay. Congress passed the Militia Act of 1795, which by and large mirrored the provisions of the expired 1792 Act, but made the president's authority to call out the militias permanent. The Militia Act of 1795 was in turn amended by the Militia Act of 1862, which allowed African Americans to serve in the militias.
So open the Wikipedia entry up and scroll down. There should be something. I should have pulled this up earlier. I can't see your screen that well.
Tell me roughly what I'm looking for.
It's the thing where it talks about what each guy had to show up with.
Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, yeah, like how much powder, how many.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
There it is, right there. Militia members were required to equip themselves with a musket, bayonet, and belt, 2 spare flints, a box able to contain no less than 24 suitable cartridges, and a knapsack. Alternatively, everyone enrolled was to provide himself with a rifle, a powder horn, 14 pounds of gunpowder.
Quarter pound.
I'm sorry, what is it?
Quarter pound.
Quarter pound of gunpowder, 20 rifle balls, a shot pouch, and a knapsack. So, like, even back then, they recognized that, like, there need to be, basically, for lack of a better term, a packing list. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to get people to start thinking about. I can guarantee, standardization. I can guarantee you that if you were some militia dude back then and you showed up like, hey, man, like, I don't have the means to have this stuff, they wouldn't turn you away, right? But if you have the means, but you'd chosen instead to prioritize, like, something stupid, then that's on you, you know? Like, I don't know how many times I've heard people talk about, like, oh, that AR-15 is too expensive, like, while they're typing on their $1,000 computer or on their $600 Samsung or whatever. It's like, man, you got the resources, you're just choosing to prioritize them in a different way than I am or other people are. So people right now are getting, like, checks for free commie money and getting unemployment checks, and there's jobs out there. There's things you could do. You could work a second job. You could work a third job. I know now we're going to get people in the comments like, I have 3 missing legs and I'm blind. And, like, dude, this isn't for you then. Like, if you are that poor off right now, I'm not saying, like, financially poor, I'm just saying, like, in a bad place, then, like, this isn't for you, man. Like, when you catch up, then this is what you'll be looking at. So that's pretty much it, man. I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to have to go to bed here soon, but if there's, like, questions or anything, we can roll through that.
No, you're good. I typed in here a little bit ago, Q&A coming up. This is where you get to shit on us, boo on us, or, you know, agree or disagree with Handsome Joe. Fast, good, and cheap. Pick 2. Yeah, good luck with that, Shred Wizard. When you're asking me for spare parts, I'm gonna be laughing. No, I'm kidding.
Fast, good, and cheap. I wonder what he's talking about. He's talking about
something about firearms.
I wonder what he means by fast.
I'm gonna, only because I know him, I'm gonna guess accessibility.
Oh, okay.
It's in the beginning of the Ranger Handbook, I'm pretty sure, about how much shot and the equipment was necessary.
So that was for the first Rangers. I think it's Rogers Rangers. I'm not an Army guy. I'm not a Ranger guy, but I'm familiar with some of that history. And, like, the Minutemen had a different standard. The Rangers had a different standard. There's all been kinds of, like, different packing lists and stuff that units have decided to go with. But taking that spirit into account and then looking at what like infantrymen today are issued and expected to carry in field and bring to war with them, although they're not really bringing it with them, they're being handed it and told to take it. That's kind of what I'm modeling some of this stuff off of.
Had to run some errands. If you guys are talking about showing up with full kit, night vision, multiple mags, etc., not financially possible unless you got 20 grand laying around. Yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah, so it's like I don't have a lot of the stuff that I'm recommending people start looking at. It's a process. If you have the resources to just like click, buy or like just go get it, like awesome. I don't hate people that are well off, or able to equip themselves out well. Nor do I look down my nose at people that like can't do that right now. But if you want to make it a priority, if you feel that it's important, then you have to figure out how to get there. And so, like Johnny Cash song, man, one piece at a time, right? What's the best time to plant a tree? Yesterday and 20 years ago, right? So if you're a 40-something-year-old dude and you're just now thinking about this now, like you've had, by military age male standards, you've had 22 years to like figure this out. And I've got family members that are in that situation. They're in their 50s and their 60s, and they don't have a fighting carbine. And like now it's 2021, and they're like, where do I get an AR-15? It's like, like the AR-15's been the fighting rifle in America since 1960s.
Yeah.
And then for the citizenry, it's been out there since the 70s or the 80s, like commercially available, maybe even before that.
Yeah, see, I'm thinking like a civvy. Sorry.
Yep. And so like that's the problem. The militia originally was the military. The only standing military we had back then was the Navy to protect the coasts and provide free passage. But like we've been watered down. Like the 1903 Militia Act, which was called the Dick Act, basically split the militia into two groups. That's something I forgot to talk about earlier. And that was the organized militia, which they basically turned into the National Guard, and then the unorganized militia, which is every male between the ages of 17 and 45. But they removed the component requiring you, the militia member, to equip yourselves with a fighting setup. Now, when we hear the word militia, we either think of like dudes wearing tri-cornered hats, like playing fifes, or some fat dude in the woods in Michigan that's, running around with an SKS and like bayoneting trees. That's they never removed your requirement to like be armed and equip yourself.
Genghis Khan said, no amount of ammo will stop a drone with IR from shooting a Hellfire missile at you. I don't think we're debating that at all. And
yeah, no.
On who we're fighting against, right? Like, yeah. And just to be clear, we're not advocating fighting. We're talking about like self-defense in a WROL situation.
So Genghis Khan, what's your solution for drones? And are you actively working on a anti-drone platform? And maybe you're not comfortable talking about it in public, but yeah, technology advances. So I'm not advocating for you to go out and equip yourself with a black powder smoothbore musket, nor am I saying you shouldn't figure out a way to protect yourself from drones shooting Hellfires. All of these things move as technology and like threats change.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be a use case for a fighting carbine or some type of firearm until we get to like lasers in the 40-watt range or something. Like you're going to have a need and a use case for some type of shoulder-fired portable firearm. But I'm absolutely eager to hear of like how you've been working on a plan to like prevent Hellfire missiles from hitting you, because that's awesome. As an American, you have the right to protect yourselves from foreign and domestic enemies, no matter their source or no matter the technology being employed against you. Do I think that an AR-15 leaning up in the windowsill is going to prevent that? No. But I know that I would rather have that than have nothing when there's people, you know, when there's bad stuff that would require the use of that.
I think there is decades of evidence of guys in flip flops and bathrobes with AKs winning engagements. Right now, of course, the people in the air come to save the day. Like I get it. Like the best way to avoid drones is to be the lone wolf. I'm not saying like we're all going to be rolling around in full kit with plate carriers, and I'm saying like the best thing for you to do is to feign compliance, not be part of a loud, massive group, and wear your armor concealed, wear your handgun concealed, and have a fighting carbine close. Because the gray man, the lone wolf, is the most dangerous.
Yeah, and I never once brought up armor or kit or anything like that because that is going to be so biased towards like use case and mission. Like if you went into Afghanistan in like 2003 and you were fighting up in the mountains, like dudes weren't running armor because they were at such high elevation. And if you were on the other side, if you were fighting for the Taliban, those guys found out pretty quick that if you rolled around in groups of 4 or 5 with chest rigs and carrying like belt feds, you were going to get targeted pretty quickly and pretty effectively. And so like all of that type of stuff, that changes. That's a given. That's like dressing for the weather, basically. Like, what should I wear outside? Like, I'm only ever going to wear a hoodie and jeans. That's it. Like, well, maybe in your part of the country, that's perfect. But like where I live, it gets cold and gets really hot. I don't want to always be wearing a hoodie and jeans. And so depending on what's going on around you, you probably don't want to be rolling around with armor with 10 full magazines, like wearing multicam. That's probably not a good idea ever.
Bacon, I plugged up for this one. Game Over says, I use a 36-yard zero, but I'm wondering what this guy speaking, his name is Handsome Joe, runs for his zero and his rifle.
It's just Joe, man. Goodness. I've used the 36-yard zero before. I've used the 50-yard zero. I've used the 100-yard zero. Personally, for magnified optics, like 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 2 to 10, 3 to 18, whatever, I like a 100-yard zero. My holds are like the bullet is always going to be hitting lower the further away I'm shooting, if that makes sense. When you start doing like 36 and 25-yard zeros and 50-yard zeros, you have like at this distance, the bullet hits here. And then at this distance, the bullet hits here. And then at this distance, the bullet hits here. And it's like up, down, up, down, up, down. 100-yard zero, it's just like it's here. And then everywhere past, it's lower and lower and lower. So in order to compensate for that, I either know my holds and hold it, or know my holds and dial it, right? Or I know that, hey man, at 150 yards with a 100-yard zero, it's only going to be a little low, so just hold center mass and pull the trigger. So personally, 100-yard zero. And if you're not going to go with a 100-yard zero and you're running like some kind of a red dot gun or something, a 50-yard zero is great. 36 is okay too. But at the end of the day, like it's up to you. Like know your zero and be very proficient at it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do a 10-yard zero with a rifle. And I probably wouldn't do a 25. So 36, 50, or 100, or even like a 200-yard zero or a 300-yard zero, like, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I use a 50-yard zero for red dots. Currently, I only have red dots. I, right now, interestingly enough, don't have any magnified optics, which is unlike me. Yep. So making a couple adjustments on my inventory. Okay. Hate to say it, but war of attrition would probably be the best outcome for victory. 100 yards. So I do find merit in the 36-yard zero. But yeah, I just personally don't have any magnified optics currently.
My biggest problem with the 36-yard zero is like unless you have a place where you can do that. There's a lot of places where like when you tell them that you want to pace off 36 yards and put your target up, if you're shooting like at a public or a semi-private range or something. We're like, what? You know, like you may not always be able to get your target at 36 yards. You're almost always going to be able to put your target up at 100 yards, assuming the range goes out that far.
Yeah.
So checking zero, confirming zero, zeroing, re-zeroing, all that stuff at 100 yards or at 50 yards is generally a little easier than like starting at 50 and pacing back to 36. In the Marine Corps, we used the 36-yard zero, but a lot of that was driven by the fact that we were using a stupid BDC reticle that didn't work. So it was kind of a dumb zero. And I believe now that the Marine Corps has gone with 1 to 8 LPVOs, they're more than likely going to be ditching that 36-yard zero and going to a 100-yard or 100-meter zero.
That's a good point. Genghis Khan responded and said, Americans are not hardened Taliban fighters who can live in the mountains on leaves and goat milk. That's true. Most people will not be able to survive just the psychological aspects, not even touching on the physical aspects of food and water as well. But the thing is that
you tell Genghis needs to find some better Americans.
Yeah.
Like those people are out there, man. There's not a whole lot of them, but those people are out there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing preventing you from becoming that.
Yeah, I think the job of the overlords was to turn us into, not everyone was the Taliban either, but who will become those individuals? And okay, this is going to sound bad. Like no one become Taliban. Okay, I'm saying who will become those hardened individuals that will be willing to fight, right? Like, and again, this isn't provoking anything or saying that this is good or bad. We're just talking about the possibility of something. And in that possibility, that those people come out. So usually by necessity. But
we're talking about like classic American values of being armed and being effective and being tied in with other like-minded individuals to protect yourself and your family and your communities. That's all it is.
Yeah. Cool. Guys, if you don't have any other questions or anything like that, we are going to do a follow-up. If you guys noticed, we were on like episode 28, but this is episode, I think, 23, maybe 24, because this was the video that we recorded like 2 weeks ago, and we couldn't drop it because we can't render a 3-hour video. So here you go. You got it live, and we'll be doing a V2.0. He'll be doing a drop video on all the testing that he mentioned, and then maybe what you want to do, like a Q&A after that, or just call it quits.
After that one, probably just look at what people have in the comment section, and if there's enough confusion or common like theme questions, like everybody's asking about a couple of different things, then if we need to make a follow-up on that, we can. But that next one should be relatively self-explanatory. Not self-explanatory, but like it'll be pretty easy to figure out what's going on from the video. So
yeah. Thoughts on a Unimag? I have no experience with the Unimag.
Unimag. Which one is that again? That sounds really familiar, but I can't think what it is right now. How many rounds does it hold?
That may be that odd, like 60 round mag. I'm not sure, but I just run PMags, and I got some like steel and aluminum mags too, but I'm a PMag.
So this is Duramag from C Products. It's stainless steel. Same form factor as a USGI. Holds 30 rounds. And then pick your flavor of Gen 3 PMag. 40 rounder, 30 rounder, 20 rounder. And then D60s and all that other stuff.
Oh, it shoots 8 different calibers: standard, 30 count of 5.56. I I wouldn't mess with it. The things that come out where, the jack of all trades, master of none. I don't know anything about it personally, but I just run PMags because I was
I'm
getting them for $8.
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up, but yeah, all the other polymer mags, Hex Mags, and all those other companies, Daniel Defense Mags, Troy Mags, those guys are all trying to piggyback off of the thing that Magpul's had going for a long time.
Yeah,
I got to test the first generation prototype PMags back in the day, and they were terrible. The difference between the first gen like pre-production prototype mags and their Gen 3 mags. I was listening to somebody talk about how they shouldn't have called them PMags. Like the Gen 3 mags are so much different than Gen 2s and the Gen 1 mags
yeah,
that they should have called them something else. So my suggestion is they should have called them R mags for reliable mags because they're hands down the most reliable magazine that you can put in your gun. The only downside of them is people talk about, well, they don't fit in my lower receiver. Then you have a lower receiver that's out of spec because currently this is the USGI magazine. So if it weren't on USGI magazines, then what are you doing?
yeah.
And there's ways to fix a too tight uh, um, magwell. Like there's easy ways to fix that.
No, I'm a 20 round mag fan too for certain things. Like I have a little SBR that, hides very well with a 20 rounder. Yep, got the 20 rounder as well. Love those. And I got the 40s too. Like I think the 40s are excellent, but
Yep.
I only think the 40s are excellent because they run, right? Like when I got the 40s, and if they wouldn't have run flawlessly, I wouldn't have kept them. Um, the Glock mags, when Magpul first came out with the Glock mags, they were trash, until they fixed the angle issue. They wouldn't work in 19s or 26s or
Yep.
whatever, but they've done a good job.
I'm not a fanboy of any one company. I like pick a company and I can tell you probably, unless I've never heard of the company before, I can tell you some bad stuff and some good stuff about them.
Yeah,
Magpul's made the bad lever. They've made all their AK stuff that generally is trash. They've made the Glock mags, which are good for like practicing clearing malfunctions and training mags, but I wouldn't use those as like your primary go-to magazine for any type of serious use. There's been too many people that have had too many issues with those things. There's been some people that have like, well, on this gun with this type of mag, like only the 15 rounders, not the 17 rounders, or like, dude, like that's for spending like just a couple of dollars more and getting a good OEM mag that's gonna work. I'm not willing to save the literal tens of dollars buying PMags over like Glock PMags over OEMs.
yeah. I just run factory Glock mags, but I've gotten a bunch of the Glock mags and like trades and stuff, and they still work. They run fine. I haven't had one malfunction.
Oh, so this guy's saying so the Gen 2s are no good. No, that's not what I'm saying. Gen 1s pre-production were terrible. Gen 2s are decent mags, but they had a lot of issues, especially if you have the tan, brown, or green Gen 2 PMags. This is a Gen 3, but if you had a Gen 2 that was like kind of like this color, the polymer was really brittle. And so when it was exposed to UV, when it was exposed to high and low temps, they would break really easy. The other thing to consider is if you're storing loaded PMags, these things actually do have a use. Like long-term storage, putting the dust cover will relieve some of the tension on the feed lips and keep them from spreading and cracking. Even on the Gen 3s, you can still crack and break a PMag. The cool thing about PMags is when they break, it's pretty easy to tell that they break, and sometimes they'll still even work. But if like the feed lip like completely shears off of the thing, then like, okay, this magazine doesn't work. That's got some upsides and some downsides. In like a grid down, supply chain down type of situation, that doesn't do you any favors. But in a grid up, supply chain up type of situation, okay, now I know that this mag's no good, and I can set it aside and then go get a replacement. I can pull the base pad and the follower out, pull all the ammunition out, take the dust cover off, and then like try and fix the body or dispose of it, right? Or use it as a training mag. But salvage the good stuff out of it. Don't just throw it in the trash. With something like a stainless steel or an aluminum magazine, you can have a dent or a bend or a tweak in the body, and you won't necessarily be able to see it. And so you're looking at your mag like, oh, cool, I got 30 in there, good to go. Shoving your gun, rack that first round in there, and you're like, life's good, right? And you get 7 rounds in, and the thing just stops working completely. And you can't figure out why. Well, there's like a small dent that you didn't see in the ribbing here, especially as these things get used and scratched and bent. You got your old one there, Dark? That old USGI mag?
Yeah.
Like when they start looking like that, it gets kind of hard sometimes to figure out if the feed lips are straight and if everything's all set up correctly. Yours is actually not that beat up. It just looks old.
It is out of spec though. When I go to put it in a magwell, it's scraped,
lines up.
scratches. Yeah, I mean, I can work with it, but this I got because it's a gold magazine that Picone signed. Like,
nice.
This is just like for
yeah.
But let's just say I got a little palette hanging around other stuff.
And I'm all about like having some sentimental stuff laying around here and there, some mementos or whatever. But like, don't be like, oh, I got 100 mags, but like 30 of them don't work, and they're like, I just have them because they were the first mags I bought. Like, bro, like, do you save your used Q-tips like in your old Kleenexes? Like, what's wrong with you? Like,
I am the guy though. I will say, I think I have 10 mags that are different colors, but I use them for like this one has 77 grain Hornady Tappet ammo. This one has 55 grain one, like this one has tracer. This one. So all of them have different purposes. It's just for identification. Now it's also just like, from collecting RIT dyed ones, over the years. But right now, like, it's okay to, mess around with stuff like for aesthetic purposes. Like I just built a unicorn Glock, right? But the unicorn Glock is going to run like a champ, and it runs with the same parts as several other 17s as well. And you know what? There may be a day where I rattle can that thing black and tuck it in my pants. So you never know. Just make sure you're using things that are all of the same quality, that are all the same spec, that are all, I could take all those parts out of all those Glocks, run them just the same. I could take all these parts out of all these 10.3 and 10.5 ARs and run them all the same.
So talking about weird stuff, just so people don't think I'm like completely hating on weird stuff. This is a 760 by 39 mag, and I have an upper for an AR-15 that's in 760 by 39. There's a lot of stuff on the internet talking about how you can't get these things to run. If you're using a good barrel and using a good bolt, and then the gas port is the right size for the spring and buffer that you're running in your standard lower receiver, and you're running good mags, it's going to work pretty well for you. I don't use this as like, this isn't something I would use for serious work. This is like a hunting and a recreational and competition type gun. So going to the range and plinking, going to the range and doing some drills, going to run a competition, going to shoot a mule deer or an antelope or something with. This is perfect for that. It also is my version of 300 Blackout, in that I can get cheap subsonic ammo, cheaper than 300 Blackout. If I try to load a 5.56 mag in the lower that has a 760 by 39 upper and hit the bolt catch or run the charging handle, I'm just going to create a malfunction. It's not going to actually chamber and blow the gun up. Yeah. And if I end up running a 7.62 mag accidentally into a 5.56 upper, it's not going to chamber. It's just going to create a malfunction. It's not going to blow the gun up. The same cannot be said when you're dealing with 300 Blackout and 5.56. At the beginning of like the craze with ammo, you could still get 7.62 by 39 relatively like normal pricing, and even now it's still cheaper than 5.56, although it's gone up quite a bit in price.
So I am the guy that says, don't take yourself too seriously. Have
Hey,
fun
yeah,
and
man.
have a can of black spray paint. Like this is just like fun stuff, right? Like this is how I know we're not there yet because I still care about the aesthetics of my tools, and they're just tools, right? But um, something that some other people are saying as well. These are tools, right? And the things that we're talking about are find standards and hold to those standards, right? So some people were mentioning medical, right? Take a stop the bleed class, and guess what? When you're setting up your medical kit, set it up with good gear, with good like folding SOG shears, with like find standards in your medical kit, find standards in your armor, find stand like that's just the part of the message that it's important that we get out. So
If you take, can you hear me okay?
yep.
Yeah, my stupid little communist Bluetooth thing's dead.
Yeah, mine
Yeah.
all the time.
If you take those banana megs and you touch them up just a little more green so they're not quite ripe, then basically what you would have is like Australian jungle camouflage with the Owen submachine gun.
That's true.
Yeah.
If you look closely, they're actually like rotted spots on them, like
Yep.
the brown bruises, the green at the
Just
top.
dust them with a little more green, and you're dulling that bright color down, and then people are just gonna think you're carrying some bananas or something.
That's true. If you open them up, the artist that painted them signed the inside, and I just happened to get the same artist that did all. No, they did 3 of the 4. One.
Yep.
But it's all fun. What level armor? All of them. I have level 4 ceramics, level 3A soft, and level 3 hard. But I had an unfair advantage.
They're getting ready to. They've been getting ready to. They haven't announced yet. They're getting ready to change the ratings because the ratings now are all screwed up. Like there is no such thing as 3+. Like there is no rating 3+.
Yeah, that's an industry rating, not a.
It's a made up rating. It's not even an industry rating. It's just like somebody decided to start saying 3+.
Made up within the armor industry.
Yeah. So like they're trying to make it so it makes a little bit more sense. There are plates on the market today that cost whatever they cost, and they market them as like this stops up to 308. Okay, well, is this bigger or smaller than 308? Smaller. Is it faster or slower than 308? Oh, it's faster most of the time, right? If you get a really, really short 5.56 and a really, really long 308, then the 308 is going to be faster, right? But given the same barrel length, this stuff's faster. So this plate is being advertised to the consumer, you and me, as it stops up to 308. Oh, well, 308 is bigger than 5.56, so it's got to stop 5.56. No, dude, like 5.56 will zip right through that stupid plate. So there are people running around in America like as just regular dudes or as cops or whatever else that are like, I bought this plate, it stops up to 308. And then like nobody that they're ever going to get into a gunfight with is going to be shooting at them with 308.
Yeah.
And so then like a 5.56 round zips right through that thing. And it's like, you just spent however much time and however much money and resources tied up in a plate that you wore for however long you wore, being super uncomfortable. And then the most common round in America dipped right through that thing like a hot knife through butter. So kind of with the whole like ammo thing and gun thing, your plate should be able to stop 5.56 at a minimum. And if they can't stop 5.56, then why do you have it?
Well, and look specifically for like the level 3 rating is to stop 7.62 by 51 at 2,800 feet per second at X amount of feet or whatever in X amount of places. But most level 3 will not. Speed defeats armor. Most level 3, sadly, will not stop XM193 out of a 20-inch barrel. Right? On a lot of plates they will, but it depends on if they're marketing it as it stops up to or it just stops this round?
What I would like to see them do with the armor rating, which they probably won't do, is be like, this level of plate will stop a projectile that weighs up to this amount at up to this speed. And
Yeah.
so then it's like, okay, that's your 3,000 rating. So it'll stop up to a 150 grain round going 3,000 feet per second.
Ooh,
And
that'd
it'll stop any round that's traveling at that speed that weighs that amount or lighter. And then your 3,500 plates, like it'll stop up to 250 grains at, you know, like some crazy number. Like do it like that. So then you don't have to sit there and be like, well, it's not this specific caliber and this specific bullet weight. Like it's kind of like some physics stuff going on where mass and speed and cross-sectional density hitting at whatever angle and all that fancy scientific jargon. But yeah, I mean, if your rifle armor won't stop the most popular rifle cartridge in America, you might be an idiot.
Like you should be seeing torture tests of 3 magazines dumped in the same spot and not have a problem.
It's not even the torture test, it's the rating. Like there's, again, well organized, well regulated, all that stuff. Like there's a rating system that exists for a reason. And when companies are trying to snake oil you on, look at this video, we dumped 1,000 rounds. It's like, dude, I don't know anything about that plate. For all I know, you guys made a one-off plate, did a video, and now you're like pimping that video and selling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plates to people. And like, there's no way of knowing whether these plates will actually stop what that plate in the video test did. Did your plate get a rating or not? Oh, it did? Sweet. Then make all the cool, crazy YouTube videos you want. Did your plate not get a rating? Well, we didn't want to spend the money on the rating. It's like you just spent that much money shooting that many rounds at the dang thing. Like you're selling these things for multiple hundreds of dollars a piece. Spend the money and get the rating. Like
that's the thing too. So what you'll see when you're looking for armor is you'll see like NIJ certification equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same as NIJ certified.
Yep. But so, imagine if I said this water equivalently doesn't have much poop in it. Like, does it have poop in it or not? I don't want to drink contaminated fecal water, dude. Like,
yeah, and don't wear armor with poop in it either.
Yeah, don't do that. It's not good.
All right, cool. It's after 1. I got to run now, but cool. Handsome Joe, thank you for coming back on, man. I appreciate you, schooling us, giving us some knowledge, and
don't take any of this stuff at face value. Do your own research, and if you got a better way, then I want to hear it, because you need an individual plan, and collectively we need a plan. I hate to say collectively, but like, there's a reason that like CPR is CPR, right? Like Dark doesn't have his own version of CPR and I got my version of CPR. Yeah, sure, they screw with the standard. Yeah, right. But if we go back to like the first type of CPR to now, sure, the CPR standards have changed, right? But like we kind of get together and we figure out like what basically works, right? We have a way of understanding like how certain things should work, and that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out, is how can we help the most amount of people be as dangerous as they can be to people that want to do them harm while remaining as safe as they can be.
Yeah, dude, a lot of people are saying it was a great show. I've been seeing a lot of the same people. We had about 41 people in here for 3 hours. Like we didn't stop. I mean, we went up some, like we went to like 50 something, they went down to 30 something, but like for 3 hours and 20 minutes, we had all these people in here. But I got to go, or you guys are going to get a sleepy dog tomorrow again, and that's not going to be good. So still pretty poo. It was good. But yeah. Safe Flight's good stuff. They're all NIJ certified.
Is it Safe Flight or Safe Life?
Safe Life. Yeah, not the.
'Cause there's one of them. I don't remember which one, but there's one of them where they're a bunch of scumbags, and they've only got ratings for one of their plates. So they're like, we have a rating for this product. Also, we never sell this product.
Oh,
These ones over here that we sell the crap out of have never been tested because we're cheap bastards.
I know.
Got one rating that one time. It's like dude having like a track record from high school on his wall, and now he thinks he's the fastest runner in the world. I don't remember if it's Safe Light or Safe Life, but there's one of them companies that are just like, they have one thing that one time got certified, and then they have never gotten any of their other stuff certified. It's pretty terrible.
Safe Life, they're the ones that just came out with the flexible rifle armor that stops 5.7, 5.56, XM193 out of a 20-inch barrel, 7.62 by 39, 308. Like, I've never seen anything like it. It's
sounds like dragon skin all over again.
I know, right? It's crazy. All right, y'all. Thank you. Appreciate you coming back on, Joe. And we'll be doing that other video on the live fire stuff, and we'll do like a video drop. So y'all enjoy. Take care. Be safe. Be dangerous. Oh, and you get to name the episode.
Oh, shoot.
It's currently your 2A freedoms and the history behind them, featuring Handsome Joe.
Let's do well-regulated independence.
I like it. Oh yeah.
Word. I gotta go to bed too, man.
And Aaron, I'll have to update them after. All right, y'all. Thanks for coming around. Y'all take it easy. Peace.
Night.
Night, man. Thanks.